Very often I am, and then sometimes I'm not. And when I catch myself realizing that I have reverted back into being Eartha May, I had to a family that eventually wound up using me as a work because the man that she wanted to marry said, I don't want that yellow gal in my house. Less. So this black family, who had two teenage children, I, I know people don't believe it when I say I don't know how old I am, but I know somewhere I'm way past, not way past 60, but I'm way past 50. But I was really still about 5, 6. She too tried. And there were times when the whole family was gone into the fields or something like that, harvesting, picking cotton or whatever they were doing, and we were left in the house alone. The two teenagers would tie me in what we call a crocus sack waist and then tie me to a tree. And with a peach tree switch, they would beat my bottom until I was bleeding, and I only had one thing to wear, and that was also made of potato sack. You start talking about it like we are talking about it now, and you try to not get emotional about it, but all of a sudden those feelings do come. The idea of them tying me to a tree, and you're not able to strict. My aunt was a very tall lady, and also very fair in complexion. She's half Cherokee. Very majestic looking. I was deathly afraid of her in duty, you know, because she got a letter from the South that told her that if I was not taken away from this family, that they would either starve me to death or beat me to death. And therefore, she decided that she would take me on into New York, but she wasn't any better. Because I was trying to get away from her, but where do you go? What do you do? And whenever I had a few pennies, subway was a nickel for it to the other, hoping that the conductor wouldn't see me, because they used to have a conductor. Everything I could possibly find to hide behind. Because I never have been with that kind of security within Eartha May that makes me feel that she will ever be accepted. I don't think Eartha, in myself, in my subconscious. And when I'm writing the book, when I was writing the book, I'm the urchin that I really know I am inside of myself. And not wearing any makeup and not caring about what I look like. Duckland, nobody wants you. And she's trying so hard to find somebody that says, Eartha May, it's all right. You want it too. But nobody's done that yet. Maybe I haven't touched me. That was Orson Welles, Ruby Rosa. And there were real love, strong love that men have had for me. Two of them, John Barry Ryan III, and particularly with boys who come from extremely wealthy families, and they are the only son. Everybody knows I'm past 50. Whatever the number may be, does not seem to matter to them. No matter how hard you try not to, it's still there. I'm very glad that she's still a part of me, and I'm very glad that she will always be a part of me, because she helps me do what she knows I have to do out there on that stage, because there is where my survival is, with that public. And with those who know me well enough to realize, accepted the part, because something is in you that says you are that character. And if you have a little bit of a difficult time finding it, you will find it eventually. It may take you in order to find the character, but you will. But that character to me was so... Being as physically huge as he was, and having to, well, at that time I was still, and to work with him was not always the most exciting thing in the world, in the manner of exciting, but it was very scary. And at the same time, it was very exciting. The three of them and me would take me to lunch in a cotton field in South Carolina. And as a result, you do what you are told to do, not what you want to do. And I think that I was afraid always to exercise my feelings about anything, because I thought I didn't know anything about taking care of children. My mother had died, or whomever that was saying that she was my mother, who had given me away to so many people at the time down south. So she brought me up north, my aunt. No, it's not for me. I am a Catherine Dunham dancer, and Miss Dunham has sent me out to get this makeup. Instinctively, using that animal instincts that I had when I was a child in the South, because being given away, you know, you have to rely on whatever is thrown, and life has been so much fun for me. But to be able to do that, to make fun of it, because I can tease myself, I can play with my mind, taking me as something that is insulting them. But Catwoman to me was really one of the best things I've ever done as a cat. And I don't think that when people are, I cannot talk for other actors, But when I am called on to do a because I'm a human being, I'm an American citizen, I happen to love this country. And I came back to America. And that's when we had this tremendous discussion all the time. As a matter of fact, the Black Panthers, that they would get me again. But I stood my ground and walked from the 7th Avenue Teresa Hotel to, all by myself, back to the Apollo Theater. And no matter how many words they threw at me, I stood my grounds and said, why is there so much juvenile delinquency in different areas of the United States among the young people? I still have an organization in Watts called KILL, where we bring the young people in to teach them physical therapy through the dance form, et cetera, as well as other things. But this luncheon was with us 50 women who were to discuss the problem. When the time came, I raised my hand and told Mrs. Johnson what the young boys of this country had told us to be involved there. It was a dishonorable war and it was an unwinnable war. So when I raised my hand and told Mrs. Johnson what those boys had told me, it seems that within 2 hours, I was out of work in the United States, according to, because I believe that if you get an education, you can cross, you have that freedom of speech, freedom. And as I said, we in our country can solve our own problems on our own home ground. And therefore, what we feel in our own country should be the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And I called go over the contract to see that everything was so and so and so. And they said he came to my house in Beverly Hills and asked me if I would do Salim Laloum, the number 5 character. She's not number 1, 2, 3, or 4. But I never worried about whether you are we live in a free democratic world. And unless we are exercising those freedoms, this is what this country is all about. Speak out and do unto others as you would have them for the world. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book now that's out called Rejuvenate, It's Never Too Late. Because those of us who have come through to us, and the value of that life. And if we didn't do that, we're absolutely out of our minds. And you can break through all barriers once you've had that education. But go for what you really, if you go for what you really love and what you really want to do, you'll do a better job at it. And money will always come and make you comfortable. What is now becoming more focused into the realization of the black people, right, that they too must become and behave and exercise their integral part of the I think that somebody who should be running this country should be somebody who knows how to be a business person, who realizes that a business should be run, is always at a deficit. And the people of the country are constantly being forced into paying off the debts of politicians whom we've. And it's about time that we realize that, like it says, we stand the chance of the possibility of becoming president of the United States. To be in that position, they have to know about how to take care of business. They have to know how to use out the blacks or the Italians or whatever. Why aren't we concerned about America? I thought this. Exactly. I don't want any favors as a person of color. I'm sure that the Japanese or I don't know about the Japanese. They seem to be wanting everything. It's so interesting to me that every time I leave this country and I come back, I find that I feel more like a foreigner in my own country than I did from the taking over very subtly. Like the man said, you won't have to need guns to take over America. We will just walk in. And this, yes, everywhere. And I keep my eyes open all the time. And you talk to people of the countries whom you can get real knowledge from, not from politicians. You're not going to get anything from politicians because they're very quote-unquote diplomatic. But the people, the real people, that's why I take my chances in going to foreign countries and talking to the real, then they are more apt to tell you the truth. But why aren't they giving away this land? Everything has to, seemingly, is dealing with what the Bible says. The religion says this piece of land to us, and there isn't always a bottom line of religious ism that says we have the right to this land. God, America. So could I go to the government and say I want my land back? The Plaza Hotel, when I was singing one night, and there were like 20 seats empty directly in front of me. And they came in, all of them, because they were saving these Aga Khan's family. And I stopped the show and waited until each one of them sat down, and they had all of this jewels on, because he was one of those people, not the Aga, but one of the members of his family, I won't mention the name. He would hire models, and then he would go to Winston's or Cartier and Tiffany's, and so I waited until they were all seated, very calm down, and they had their little coffee and that. And then I said to him in Turkish, "Teşekkür ederim." And he looked at me, and at the end of the show, I don't really think I'm looking for anything special except maybe a good partner, because I'm a dirt person. I love land. I know if I have a piece of land, I will never go hungry because I know very much how to be offended if someone gave it to me. But it's more than apt will be hawked for a piece and all that sort of thing. But when I came out of the South into New York, being brought there by my aunt, who took me out of those after my mother gave me to this family who was not very nice to me because I'm not the right color to be accepted by the black, to be accepted by the whites, and you on top of all of that is a bastard child. And nobody wants you. But if you're given away, then that family or whomever you're given away to uses you as a work mule. And of course, if there was food, I got it. If there was no food, then I was the last one to be fed. So between the animals, the cats and the dogs and myself, so I learned how to survive from the forest and from the dirt. My aunt brought me from the garbage cans and sleeping on the subways until I found a way into the Catherine Dunham Company by having an audition. And when I asked him what is the character about, what kind of person I am, how old a woman is she, and he said, you are all women. You represent all women of all. And that's why I chose you to do this part, because you're the most exciting creature I've ever. Years, I began to understand what he meant, because from my side that he felt about me. And to me, an exciting person is knowing one of the things about an exciting person to me is knowing when to say something and when not to say something. And if you have something to say and you don't know how to say it, then the best thing to do is be quiet. Even though they said it was very exciting, from the artists who were in peak, Max Gordon, after I was a flop at Levy and Rose, Max Gordon, who owned the Blue Angel, called, and 6 weeks or 2 months later, because I was in New York, I had no way of getting back to Paris. Nobody, even the William Morris Agency, didn't remember my name. They didn't know whom the Delaware was, but they were the ones who brought me to America for La Vie en Rose. And Max, she was in it, but it was June Carroll, Ronnie Graham, and myself, because we sat around for something, so forth and so on. And I was the best dressed pauper in Paris, because people like Jack Fath, Pierre Bellemare, Balenciaga liked my body, and they liked me as a personality. So they would call me and they would give me the clothes that they thought were still. He should still have a kind of show like that. We should still have a kind of show like Jack Pa. And which is because they're intelligent people. What happened to these intelligent writers who have, you know, because a show like Jack Pa is not today, I think he will always be able to make a good providing situation for my life. Is different every day. The words may be the same, but there is a lot of innuendos too, a lot of ad-lib. And last night it was Michelle from Star Trek, a girl, and Carl Reiner's wife was there last night. And it's wonderful knowing that I don't like to know before because I get too nervous. Afterwards, it's wonderful, exciting that, my goodness, that person came to see me and all that, you know, but it's what life. Here's to love and here's to you. Because after all is said and done, because I know now what I have achieved and I know more of where I want to go. And I am now very sensitive to my own, accountants maybe who were thieves, etc., etc. And that's why I'm saying to you, Skip, I bought, thank goodness I bought real estate, because that I know how to survive on. But you never know from one moment to the other. It depends on what you do with your life, which becomes the most valuable thing. And what you've done with your life. For me, I feel there's always another tomorrow. Well, I'm not saying yes or no. I don't know what happens tomorrow, but I don't have any man in my life who wanted. The mothers became the most domineering situation that cut off the relationships, and the ones that I thought of him and his people to advise him to do that. Because I think it's about time also that two different cultures, too many races, too many groups, too many thises, too many that's.
And getting to a point in their lives where they are just about able to start paying back their parents for whatever that
of the rejection that she had when she was a child. And now that it's good for me to be a stereotype, and that's what I am, that fine. Teenager, 13, 14 years old, I want to be evil with the man, whereby I want to be evil is playing with a child, so to speak. For the child, the cabarets can't afford that. And it's true, the cabarets had to close up because they couldn't find people as Paul Sullivan, who owned the Plaza Hotel once, and every step of the way, and I do realize I don't have to make myself do that, every step of it. I think that when I started to sing songs like that, it was RCA who pushed those of leaving the company. I didn't have enough chutzpah on my own to do that at the time. But when Miss Dunham forced me to by saying I dare a girl from the South that everybody rejected and said she was a yellow gal and too ugly to be, is from that child of the South Carolina when nobody tie the mechanisms behind the discos.
Right.
Because we do not. And I came across the letter that Jack Anderson wrote me. It said, these are your files that we found, particularly requested by Lady Bird and President Johnson in the United States, so that I would be not seen, and therefore my opinions about the problems among the young people of America at that time. That was the question of the luncheon. And 50 of us ladies who work in the different communities across America, and me, and so also Indians, I'm working with these people all the time. And therefore I know what their feelings are. And when they ask the question about, am I getting a good credit for putting flowers along Route 66, place that I can remember that did not have a return engagement. And when I was not asked, maybe my popularity is waning and so forth, that does happen. And I started to begin to called me in 1974, January, and said, this is what we found anywhere. And therefore that's why you're having a hard time. Or they were claiming that they were communists or something like this. And when they couldn't find anything on you and make you a very unpopular name in the eye of the public and in the minds of the public. And not that they're still doing it. If they want to get rid of you, they'll find a way to get rid of you. And the best way to do it is to have worked with, just as they did with the Anti-American Committee. I was shocked when I came back to America in 19. This kind of thing is happening to us. We fought a war against things like this. With the something, I still can't believe it. And you never know if it is still going on, because my side of the story was never really told. What was I going to do? Apologize. Wanted me to do that. And I said, I think they should apologize to the American people, because they know we should not be involved in that war. And I don't understand how someone like this, the man who had the fate of the young boys of this country in the palm of his... Sorry, but morally, whatever it is, we're not supposed to, we shouldn't be. He lost his job, which I lost my job.
Right.
I still did it. I didn't know I was going to lose my job. I'm an American citizen. I happen to love this country. And I know that we have our struggles in Wells, because being as physically huge as he was, to work with him was not always the most exciting thing in the world, in the manner in... Because I believe that if you get an education, you can...
Well, I mean, we're on the break right now. We finished... in March, and I went into an English movie, an English film called Chalet Girl, which was like a romantic comedy kind of film. So that was a lot of fun. It was a good change, and back to shoot the 4th season in July, and we're doing a couple of days in Paris, which I'm very excited about. I love Paris, so she took care of me, kept me out of trouble. No, she's wonderful. How many people can say they've done that? So so that was fantastic, and was really pleased with the way they brought everything together. I think it was probably the best finale we've had of the 3 seasons. So so yeah, I mean I don't know. I mean I really don't know what's going on, because we haven't had the scripts yet. I mean, maybe are they meant to be together? Are they not? You know, are they bad for each other? Because it looks that way. It's fighting fire with fire, isn't it? I don't know. I have great fun working with Leighton, as I said. So great partnerships, you know. The crime-fighting duo or something like that, or they're like Bonnie and Clyde a little bit maybe. But, so they you know, they bounce off one another. They I think
get married.
Well, I mean, he was going to propose at the end of the 3rd season. You know, that was his big step. But maybe it was a good thing. I saw he had very little consideration or respect for others, and enjoyed playing games with people and manipulation. But then that kind of evolved. We have one, and fall in love with Blair and had this relationship. But of course, his other sides to his personality, kind of some self-destruction or destruction of their bond, of their relationship. So so we've seen him progress, we've seen him grow. I think he's learned a lot. I think it's a mixed thing, really. I mean, it's a progression of somebody's life almost. You know, people change, people go through different. And then Josh and Stephanie, who came off the OC. They brought everything. They brought their built-in fan base, attractive. I think their entertainment value. So I mean, I think all of these things.
The final season, do you think?
Oh, I don't know, man. I mean, we've got this brand new Samsung smartphone to take out and about with me while I'm here doing this kind of like hit the people back. I mean, it's been a pretty extravagant season, you know. I mean, it all kind of ended up in lots of misbehaviour with regards to his relationship. The gossip girl thing everywhere, because it means the show's getting the attention it deserves. You know, people are...
I think we're very different places, you know, very different countries. And it's a great thing for me to be able to...
called Johnny. And Johnny is the love interest of the character Kim, who's played by the wonderful Felicity's character. She is a chalet girl. She works in... The dudes out here that are pretty much out of control. So when I say I thought I was up to the job and I thought I was good, I was telling everyone before, I'm like, close to Brooke Shields. Or let alone have her play my mother, which is incredible. She's wonderful, absolutely loving, caring, warm person. Everything you'd want Brooke Shields to be. Everything I think America would want Brooke Shields to be. And we actually got to dance one night to a Grease song out in a local... Yeah, the prodigal son returns. It's good fun. I was in the Virgin Mobile store in Sydney last night, and we did a signing, and I got a chance to meet all the people down there. And it was a crazy show of support. You know, so many people came out. So it's been of playing somebody younger than myself. You know, we actually have to like shave every day, which can be very irritating. Third season, and we had such a kind of spectacular cat and mouse thing going, and you know, will they, won't they finally get back together after all the drama that unravelled throughout the past year. So, but I'm hopeful. An absolute roller coaster. It's been fantastic. I mean, at first, you kind of a little bit in awe of everything. I mean, I still am in awe of stuff that's going on. But you just take it day by day and enjoy it. And I get to meet wonderful people and go to wonderful places. So I went in and read for both. And I read in an English accent as well, which could have been I just found myself being so busy, tied up with the show and everything like that. You know, music I absolutely adore. I mean, as I'm sure we all do. And it was something that I really... I didn't really see a way to kind of make it a career or a way to make it your living, you know? So it all kind of started snowballing, and it was fantastic, you know? All of a sudden, you know, dreams became... A nice, charming script, definitely, and charming, nice character to play. And then we're a nice change, indeed, from the stuff I'd been doing. Been working on Gossip Girl for doing that season, so yes, it was a nice... No, I mean, it's like it was a great girl and I watching the football, so it was a good time. But I think the girls are telling a lie there. It was definitely Tamsin that drank. Play a little bit, yeah. I play a little bit of guitar. Absolutely, I've got a very nice 90s. Yeah, skied since I was 11 with the school. We used to go on school trips around Europe. So absolutely, I think, yeah, hugely. I think it was something that was very fitting for me in that respect. It kind of not really fell into it. I was, in and around it as a limits, but no, what we've experienced is, everyone who's seen it is, my character's a bit of the bad boy. But I mean, there's a bunch of elements to it that kind of have made it attractive to a very bad relationship with his father. So he's running through all that in Manhattan. And my answer and my response is always, the issues of growing up, dealing with relationships, dealing with families. And so for me, I feel, no matter who you are, once you kind of read between the lines and get into the show a little more, the vision would be to keep being involved in exciting projects, and work with people who are at the top of their game that I'm going to be involved in. We play just before the Los Angeles Galaxy play. It's next Saturday, actually. Kind of expect me to be like Chuck Bass, but everything really kind of was draining. I think everyone was draining. Everyone was really pleased to... Now, I don't know, maybe it's the amount of American television we get in the UK, I mean, we came with the family, we came out to California, we went out to Vegas, we had a show that they do there, so we left England to do something that they did 500 years ago. I mean, you've got these amazing structures, with the hotels and everything. It just seemed like such a... Losing his best friends, Nathan Blair, pretty well, because, where one's been taken away, he's been replaced with something else, he's been replaced with more family, his father's relationship and more support in family, and I think that's something that he's always missed, so I think that holds a very attractive he gets to wear these fantastic designer clothes, and I think the thing that's fantastic is it's not just about the costume of Chuck. It's very unique, it's very individual, and that can only help me kind of, it's because it's based in an international city. New York's the capital of the world. It has people from all countries around the world and from all sections of society. Also, the stories, whether, albeit it's based in the Upper East Side and the context is, these very wealthy people, family, love, and all the other things that kind of, we love it and enjoy what we're doing. And it's fantastic to know that you've got these kind of
people that really enjoy your work.
Go to the tourist spots, but you actually get to Brixton, hang out, you understand me, and get an event, because I was watching people getting torn up by a tornado, which is actually news. You know, I appreciate those couple of people getting together to copulate, but I couldn't understand how that became a day event called news.
Exactly.
You know, go on and get your copulation on. That people get married every day, and it ain't that big of an event. You understand me?
Exactly.
You know, I love your little palace and all that, the nice little peasantry that went on, and then, you know, I seen it live till you seen it live. You know what I mean? There's only so much TV allowed, brother. Like, brother, you have caught the brother.
Exactly.
The one and only undercover brother.
Exactly.
Afro with the show. If you touch the throat, you got to go. You know. As you can see when I walked up here, it's not an entourage, it's me, solo dolo. Big balls. If you're a female, giant ovaries. Said, you know, George Bush don't like black people. I don't think he like white chicks. You know, so, you know, this is supposed to be a moment, you know, little dudes, you know, ego to get out of whack, jump, you know, because, you know, you need to just go and sit down until it's your turn to get on stage. You know, you are hired to do this, you know, and VH1 hired you to come and do something, you know, that the boy was out of pocket then, you know, but no, I've never stepped on anybody else's moment. I just happen to have, you know, a tongue that says some things at certain times that people wouldn't expect my kids in for anything in the world, you know. So, you know, the show, it deals with, you know, me being a father and having that many women, because all of my baby mamas are very cool young ladies. You know, basically we just sat down and had a conversation and said, look, we adults, the kids didn't ask to be here. It's not about us arguing or bringing up old issues that we might have had or still have. You know, we got to be adults and do the right thing by the fucking one. I said at the house, we need more police. You know what I'm saying? Black people, we be fucking with y'all about this shit. Cause ain't a brother or sister in this room that has fucked up ass shit, man. That boat ride, cause it ain't like it is today, you know what I'm saying? Couple of weeks from, please open your little hand, cause hitting that nigga with that fist is like throwing a grape. Teach yourself all you want to, but you can't change your genetic code. Cause Dennis Rodman put together a team to go over to North Korea and play some basketball. And of course, I'm sure make some kind of money, because it ain't that a ball player wants to go play basketball. You teach us to teach our children that violence is not the way, but when it comes to y'all, it seems violence is the way. Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korean War, World War I, II, except for back in, I think it was the 70s or the 80s, and they wanted to boycott because they didn't like this country. Meanwhile, people been training for 10 years, can't go because somebody got an attitude in the White House and the Capitol. Hell alone. And we all know Dennis ain't wrapped too tight, but the boy was trying to articulate his situation on some news station, and they tried to corner him into asking the head of the Korean peoples to pull somebody out of jail that's in jail over there, Pink and Bright. And he looked like he'd been partying all night. Wrong dude to ask to do politics. He played basketball. I don't want the boy negotiating for me, but you want him negotiating for you on any kind of deal. So to ask that man that question is retarded of the question asker. Hope you make some money. And for the brothers that went with you, have some fun. Play some, they gonna play ball. So let them play ball. That's what I say. You know, EGM. Take your ass over there. Obama, you play ball. You did that when you first got putting together a basketball game because they're trying to give you an olive branch to get some kind of conversation going on so y'all can stop this child and say, get a goddamn bomb, you motherfuckers freak the fuck out. Shut the fuck up. Look in the mirror, motherfuckers. I want the young motherfuckers in here tonight, no matter what your nationality is. Took the oil, nigga. Now, if you don't think you know about American motherfucking history, wherever we land, we don't leave. We already got 3 bases, permanent bases in Iraq. We still in Vietnam. When we all came out of it, this goes from Martin Show. Something good there. I think he was singing to his wife, let's stay together, you understand? But I hope he mess up, because I'm looking for you. You know, people think he's kind of bougie or whatnot, you know, because the brother's educated, but I think he's got some... Every motherfucking phone is a tracking device. Jeeps, they know where the fuck I'm at right now. You got one in your purse. They know where the fuck you at. You understand me? Now, a plane has a black box in the motherfucker that gives off some kind of tweet, 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 tweet. Don't nobody know where the fuck the tweet coming from? Walking around saying, hey, motherfucker over here.
Now, the pilot knew it was gonna crash before anybody else. I know they got parachutes. You telling me nothing, the motherfuckers jumping at their computer, flight simulator, like they gonna find out something on the flight simulator. Like, I'm just gonna practice crashing into the ocean. Somebody hijacked that motherfucker that was on the plane. They landed something, probably torching his ass right now, trying to find out what the fuck he know or didn't know. And the rest of the prayers going out to the families of those who have family members on that plane. They landed somewhere. I think they wanted because the president of IBM, the CEO, was on that. They got him. They probably torching his ass right now, trying to find out what the fuck he know or didn't know. And the rest of the prayers going out to the families of those who have family members.
Come through parents and stuff. He had that, and there's some nurture in that. He just pushed it and made it work. When I was at stand-up workshop learning to do stand-up, because I only did sketches, but he was down, there were different types of stand-ups you could be, you could choose one, and one was the sort of godlike genius era, and that was the Robin Williams. You can head to that, but only if you're crazy. He could have done it more, because I think what happens in America, if you get successful in comedy, you will go into a television series or a film series, and that becomes key, and it's a different thing to stand-up. So I feel he did occasional stand-up tours after taking off into such a huge way, but not all the time. He was so wonderful at it. I don't actually know why he didn't come back to it. That was just Robin. He was a nice guy. When I first met him on a film, he was just very welcoming, and I said, can you watch my video? And he watched it immediately, which was very odd. You would expect a lot of pullback on that, but he was just a decent person, and for a lot of us, he's clinical, and some people have it and some people don't, and it's a disease. It's all of us comedians do, but he was making himself laugh. I'm pretty sure he was performing. He was the first person in his audience. When I did this film, he would have just gone off, and they said the script would have been here, and he would have gone off in 7 ways to. Can't actually try and be someone. You can't say I want to be that person. You can add little bits onto your own style, but my style was more sort of Woody Allen with Billy Connolly and Richard Pryor mixed in. But it's just that he did hit this godlike genius place of being able to do anything, and it was political, and it was fast, and it was impressions, and he would run through. They don't usually move off the stage. He just had this ability to take a room, and he's just right up there. I mean, it's. You know, there should never be number ones in creative things, but he's in the top 10 of all time, and maybe the top 5. It is rather tragic. I didn't want to come in here and do this, but I thought, I was discussing this with Steve Coogan, whether I should do it, because sometimes it looks like everyone jumps on telly and talks about people, but I just wanted to say. I announced 5 years ago that I'd run in May 2020, so that's kind of weird, because you normally will be the 4th when I get that, and then Russian. Well, I'm kind of ambitious. I'm positive on people. I want me to do well. I want everyone to do well. I hate the right wing. I hate religious extreme. If you're a cabinet minister, that is a high position of power. But it's more of a cheerleader for London. You're in charge of transport and police. But once you've chosen Cameron, well, he is centre-right, so I'm okay with that. But he's not my party. It's more about the few than the many. And he said he wouldn't take part in the National Health Service, and he sort of did, and so I'm for Italian. And if you say the big 3, if it's 3 syllables or more, if you just say it with a different accent, it is probably the same word. Transportation. French, and I'm going to do German and Spanish, Italian, and things. But, you know, I just thought they spent all this time learning English, it would be... No, at the moment it's just there's election going to come up, so we don't even need to talk about that. And they'd say 60 million drachma, and you think, is that too bad? And I appreciate that. I don't know what to say. I asked Stephen to do it. They are interesting, actually, moths, you know, because they're kind of like flies without a mission. Well, my thing is, I know everyone's gone kind of weird, but if Europe doesn't make it, then I don't think the world's going to make it. We've got to learn to work together in some shape or form, and Britain's got to be at the centre of that. And we all come out of Africa. And we come from the same people. So we were a small group of about 10,000 people. Eddie's Mandela marathons. I tried to run 27 days. That was going to kill me. So it was a prescription drug. No, not a fan. The fact was he was going 5 miles an hour. He was going 5 miles an hour, but straight for me. I mean, this is the way to say, well, live and let live, and let's do our lives, and we don't get involved. We don't get that active, and so we have to get active to keep fighting. Most extensive, I'm claiming it's the most extensive comedy tour ever. I just go around claiming records. And Michael Mittermeier came over, South Africans, Canadians, Australians all coming in, Dutch are coming and doing a street performance. They say, we know you know, so do some good stuff.
Do special stuff.
Don't just... It was only half full, it was raining. I thought, this is going to be miserable. But because I'd got to Dunedin, not many people came down there. They went, well, I think I could get in, I could get elected, and then people start grumbling and say, oh, you were interesting before and it's boring now, because I'm going to having a good show. That he keeps doing his talk show for some time. Oh, actually, well, when it comes to genitalia, if we're getting down to that, what's the audience? There's this thing of dumbing down that they talk about in television, going for the lowest common denominator. I tend to go for the highest common denominator, and I assume the intelligence of the audience. And if I played an audience that wasn't sharp, they would probably lynch me, because they would say, what are you talking about? But I assume people have watched a whole bunch of films, they can get references to history, politics, obscure things. Because I don't know enormous amount. I do take in a lot of facts, but I tend to just throw out small facts that I've learned, which actually, and the changes in technology equals the future. This is my sort of theory. So if you study the past, you get the future. You can work out what's hacking. And I'm very positive about the union. So I think it's the way that if humans aren't... People say that, actually. People say, you won't remember much of that time. I remember that and everything before that. Lemonade and biscuits. And some other kids were there, and other parents were there. So it was quite weird. It's like a party. I think if you're alternative sexuality, gay, lesbian, transgender, you're not wildly emotional, you know, not great at sensing styles and designs. My senses, women tend to, and gay men, I think, have their senses more heightened. Men have them lowered, but maybe slightly more focused. I have two sort of modes. I just go girly mode or boy. You know, there's no shame. There's guilt and shame are the two adjectives you get free with. Not through, because people say, you've got known because of the transvestism. And that is not the case, even though it obviously makes an extra bit of something that goes with it. But, you know, or you're gay, you're lesbian, a lot of them just keep it in. So it wasn't the thing that made it happen, it's just... Well, yeah, I've always wanted to have boobs, but, you know, I look kind of blokey, so there's lots of, you know, it's basically a lot of teenage girl stuff where girls say, I want to have boobs, and I was thinking... And they said, you go to university and we pay you a wage, and then you give 3 years to the army after that. So I seriously consider that, because I'm quite military in my head. I'm very strategic. If you think of, you know, some people's careers go great and it goes off and they go, hey, and then when their career stops, they don't know how it get all this rationalised, which could be in the Constitution. I don't know what's it. I've downloaded the Constitution, but I haven't read it. It's also boring. See, politics is incredibly tedious. That's why most people are tedious as hell. And I'm a popcorn-eating film watcher, so I find politics fascinating, interesting. I know it, but it's tedious. The fun way to make politics exciting is to have a war. World War II was very good. It was great films came out of that. 50 million people dead, and we decided this is best not to do this anymore. A bit of a bang to over many, many centuries, you know. And we kept doing this over and over. I mean, I think we need to have a sort of Supreme Council in Europe where you have all the heads of all the countries. What a waste of space. I mean, she was very tough and firm. She was very, you know, Hitler-light, I feel. So she's kind of, you know, picked up a few things from Adolf there. Trout, isn't she? She's got no imagination. Of course you can get democracy with people speaking different languages. And maybe she's just... She wasn't a lazy person, I couldn't say that, but it's a lack of imagination. And I feel since 1945, any dictators in the world is like an abomination. What are these people doing here? Should have been stopped. We need to have the International Criminal Court. We need to have that with teeth. All dictators should immediately go and have life imprisonment. You don't even need to try them if you think about it, because you don't need to prove that they're dictators. They're dictators, so just put them in prison, throw away the key, end of story. So getting rid of dictators is okay, but I don't believe George Bush went in there for getting rid of a dictator. I never saw him walk... He never went out of America. You know, he went to China with his dad, I think, but that was it. So if he'd spent his entire life saying, the Iraqis, they have a tough time. I love the Iraqis and I want to help them, give them democracy, then you'd kind of believe it. But this is someone who just had unfinished business and a lot of doing it. this should have been stopped. We need to have the International Criminal Court. We need to have that with teeth. All dictators should immediately go and have life imprisonment. You don't even need to try them if you think about it, because you don't need to prove that they're dictators. They're dictators. So it's on the ground, so we can do anything we want out there. I don't feel that it came from that.
Everything's got a bit weird. Terrorism has started to happen. You know, the Oklahoma bombing, which everyone was quite...
In general forms, yes, you've got to separate religion and state. Using terrorism with religion would have less culture to grow. There's obviously a number of things from religion, and maybe the Buddhist religion is the one to look at because it has no... It's when you get the magic thing. There's obviously something spiritual seems good, open-minded. My life is a bit messy, but I live in here. I see a play after that, and I'd done one play before that, and that was... but you really like the idea of people going, that's great, so much that you'll work your arm. God or force of nature. And I think my argument is that we're forced to be our own force of nature in life, because I don't think there is a God. So, and then you can do the feeding of the 5,000, but you just got to get your friends and borrow some fishes. The fishes and loaves, who would actually sit down for fishes and loaves? I'm not sure. Just say, oh yeah, a bit of fish and a bit of bread. It hasn't really caught on, the fishes and loaves thing, ever since then. I just think the bread thing would have worked in the feeding of the 5,000. But these are all miraculous things. I mean, Simon Sharma is just, you know, acts of force of nature. I think that's what we all do need to be to get through this life, to make the positive things happen in the world. So that is the idea behind. No, I just did the whole show in French, yes, which is also downloadable from the website. It's the previous show. It's stripped. They in Paris, they can go, oh yeah, squirrels, écureuils, avec un fusil or avec un banjo. You know, they can go, oh yeah, that's stupid. In fact, in France, they don't have much absurdist humour, as they call it, or surreal humour. And I said, but Monty Python. Say, oh yes, we like Monty Python. Not all of them dig it, but you know, the cool people dig Monty Python. But cooler people, the people with a certain amount of education, they can dig surreal humour. And it's just the references. So there's no, my theory is there is no French sense of humour, there is no German sense of humour. I just think there is mainstream and alternative sense of humours in every country. So you might say Benny Hill's like a mainstream British sense of humour, but he made all these references, you know, people slapping on heads, naked people running around, and people could understand that in quite a lot of countries. So there you go. And then there's Python is the example of more alternative humour. So you just make your
to learn, isn't it?
Well, you see, I don't think any language is that difficult, because all Russians speak Russian, yeah? All Mandarin Chinese kids speak Mandarin Chinese. Less bright. So if some language was really hard, there should be people saying, okay, here in Russia, these kids just don't speak it, they just point at things. Now, I don't that hard. I think it's... Now, I could be wrong when I get to Russian, because I haven't actually laid in. I've learnt the alphabet. Learnt the alphabet. And Dylan Moran has too, and both me and Dylan Moran want to do Russia in Russian. But I'm going to be doing German next year. I'm already touring France in French. German next year, in German, in Berlin, 2 months there. Then I'm going to do Spain for Spanish, and then Russian, and then I'll be able to report back more accurately. But I think it's the Cyrillic alphabet that makes us go, whoa! At the middle of it, I don't even know where to begin on that one. But you just have to get beyond the alphabet, and I can't prove this, but I think it should be, it's definitely doable. It's just the amount of time that you need to put into it. But it's a good thing to do in this millennium, because, you know, we're in a financial crisis around the world and whatever, and it's sort of bubbling around at the moment. But then the world tends to go off and become slightly more right-wing and hate other people, and xenophobia turns into like racism and all this kind of stuff. And I'm saying, no, let's go the other way. It was all, Live 8 was going on, and Bob Geldof, a lot of people down in London, and I felt, there was Edinburgh, so I felt I should go up and help there. And so I just got myself there and started trying to help work with activists there. And I think they said we'll be in the concert at Live at Murrayfield. And immigrant family. I think it's beautiful that Britain can do that. You can go from them coming in from escaping from the Nazis to their sons both being politicians, one running for being prime. No, I was going round as someone who's going into politics in 8 years. I was going focused. You know, it's a 5-year parliament. It could well be. So all the focus keeps going towards the sitting government. So he doesn't get so much action in front of cameras. This is the. I know Nathan quite well, and I haven't seen everything he's done, so it's just great. I just happened to be in town for Comic-Con at the weekend, and this was here, so I said, well, yes, I'll come. It's great. So, you know, great cast, Nathan Lane, welcome to film studios. But when I'm doing theatre, I love doing it, but filming is my first. They were and are my gods. They are my comedy gods. I think I've stolen everything from. You know, goldfish have a 30-second memory, so they don't know how long they live. They never have fear. They don't have worries. They can't remember their worries. You know, everything is going bizarre. I don't think anyone in Britain could believe that someone could hack a phone of someone who was you know, will be going, why wasn't I hacked? But no, I'm quite happy not to be hacked, unless I was hacked, and then I'm not happy to be hacked. Yeah. Show, and there's 1 or 2 tickets left if you want to just be sitting in a nice place, because I think at the back, people are reluctant just doing it. I'm doing it on my own, so no orchestra. The orchestra has been told just hang around, guys. And there's all these guys with violins. The gig tomorrow, you'll find as you walk up and buy things and stuff, there's going to be a lot of violinists just kicking their heels. It says it's just us 9, and we have a big table. And but so they came down. We'd say, what's that's what goes on there. But I'm very positive on Europe. It's what humanity does. We gradually come together. We gradually get fairer rules for everyone. So and Russian and do more in Russian. I really want to have Russian homosexuality laws in the mid-80s in a country that's supposed to have had democracy for, you know, 2 years, 300 years, whatever. We're supposed to have it in the UK. And so, you know, countries can go backwards. It's not that all Canadian mayors. I just thought when I was in Montreal, they were saying, "Have you heard about the mayor?" I went, "Yeah." I got here, they said, "You heard about the mayor?" What, the Montreal? In open air format, because there's so many other things that people can do. In a theatre, people are watching an escape, someone's going to time it, and that was the beginning of me developing my voice and for my own character. And characters, I always played characters with voices like this, or small little idiots who said, "I don't know, I don't really want to be there." So I was always playing these voices like Monty Python, and then I started developing my voice. That took me into stand-up. That's the front part of my stand-up. All the back part is me doing sketches. I set up a scene with myself. That's it, and it locked in, has never moved. And that was drama. And then I couldn't get dramatic roles going. And I made someone laugh when I was 12 and then I discovered Python and the Goons and Spike Milligan, Peter Sellers, and I thought, okay, I will not do drama, because I became a spotty teenager. Most teenagers go into this spotty act. God, if there is a God, says, no, you'll have the worst looks that ever happen. And so I thought, I can't be a hero, romantic hero, and with this going on and greasy hair and pimply. Never see her again, and then you go to a boarding school and you don't see Dad for 2/3 of the year. So it was very difficult to survive. I just closed down emotionally, really. Stopped crying. When I got to about 11, I realized crying was bad because you lose arguments that way, so I stopped. And so they decided, well, keep doing the job. Kids will go, that's an option. So he used to go to sleep with the radio on just to have voices happening in the house. Since then, which are not standard practice, otherwise everyone from boarding schools would go and do all this stuff, or I'm not sure. I've got a determination genetic, I think, going on. I've got a bloody-mindedness thing. I can take quite a lot of grief coming my way and push back on it. I came out 30 years ago being transgender, and it was not cool in 85 to say you were transgender, or 90, or 95, or 2000, or 2005, or 2010. 2015 gets hugely tricky, because I told everyone in 85 that I was TV, transgender, whatever, trans now I think we're called. And then I told my dad 6 years later, there was this "don't tell Dad" thing, and I thought, no, I've got to tell Dad, and he was cool about it. And then I told him on a Saturday, and on a Monday I did this first, I made one joke about being transvestite, and then I thought I got to turn up in a dress, and that was a few months later, and I thought my career would get off the ground, or longer if you go back into the teenage years, and I just thought this could kill it right here. So it was true, it's right, it's what humanity needs to do. We need to feel the fear and do it anyway. You need to push back against the extremists and the hateful people try and stamp on you, who have murdered transgender people and lesbian people and gay people for thousands of years, since the dawn of time. You've got to push back against these disgusting people and say that we are not disgusting, because they've been saying we're disgusting. We're saying, actually, this is genetics, it's in there. They'll find the code at some point, and I'm just a human being. I have certain rights just to exist, and the guilt and shame, I'm not having that. And they said, well, that's in its infancy still, because there's so many millions and millions of pieces that they still haven't quite got. Different research happening around the world. But at some point, I predict here and now on your program, they will find there'll be a gay, there'll be a lesbian, there will be transgender one, and they won't be quite so boxed in. They will, and there's people who we are attracted to. So sexuality has got a few layers in there, and it's quite a complex beast. But I do predict it's genetic because I never chose this, and I'm so straight. I still have got all that side to me, but there's also the girly side. And I've just been honest and told people, like, if I looked for it, I could find it anywhere, anytime, probably, yeah. There was a young woman in Brisbane who said, "Are you wearing lipstick?" I said, "Yeah," and said, "You're sick." And then she walked off. And then my makeup artist, who happened to have been judo champion of Europe at 15, she went off after her she was, before, of 30 years since I came out, for about 25 years, yes. My confidence has changed recently. I'm running for mayor of London in 2020, so I better be ready for whatever. Yes, but I also, I wanted to do all the things I've done. If I had a kid and you're trying to drag them around the world, or you leave them in a boarding school, or what do you do? That gets quite confusing, and it's also relationships. They're difficult. It was weird because I started taking off without, I'd already told my friends I was transvestite, but I hadn't told the makeup's got nothing to do with the comedy. I'll just do surreal comedy. So audiences came to see what I was wearing, and then thought, "Oh, he doesn't change boy mode." The last one was in girl mode. The next one will probably be in girl mode, or boy mode, or duck mode, on the Keystone Cops. But what I'd say now is that in the 60s and 70s, people paid money to buy Heart and Soul from the Beatles, the Stones, all those bands. Then now you, no, I don't. I'm not in the line to be James Bond. I actually want to do action movies, but they won't let me, so I run 43 marathons, and I'll do my own. I've done Treasure Island, and the director said, because I have basic Treasure Island, Long John Silver has to go around on one leg with a crutch, and it was a very 1700s type crutch, very basic crutch that I had to go around on in sand. So, but I had the stamina to do it because I could run all these marathons. But it's just that I think we're all designed. We could. When I did 2 in 2 days, I did think actually I could stop now and I could dine out forever on this. Yes, and it was surreal, and no one would believe me. I was running all around the UK, from capital of England to capital of Wales to the capital of Northern Ireland to capital of Scotland and back. And no, people just wouldn't believe that it... Which is about 3 hours worth. And then I actually ejaculate. But not in a sexual way, in a thing. So if you're of an ethnic minority, you can actually rail against, generally the one rail against people with money, all these kind of things, if you're working class against the upper classes. But if you're straight and white and male, middle class, it's just useless. So thank God I'm a transvestite. To journalists back in Britain that I was a transvestite, and now I don't wear a dress, and then I have to get people to believe me that I am a transvestite, which is really weird, because I never thought when I first came out that I'd have to, sort of pants, as they say in America. They don't call that drag, so I say it's not drag for me. I'm expressing a feminine side of myself, so I'm just wearing a dress. Okay. I would wear makeup and whatever. I'm in boy mode at the moment, just like the Human Torch. You can do flame on, flame off. So I'm boy on at the moment. If you go in shops, you won't see that one up front because they think that's too risque, I think it's pushed. But they swung with it, they're cool with it. People have a visual sense of humour. In Britain, they have a visual sense of humour. The Germans have no sense of humour, and they say all of America has no sense of irony. My mother died, actually, because I did a play. I played a raven. My mum made the raven costume before she died. She died when I was 6. And I remember not being that bothered about this sort of performing thing. Then I went to a boarding school and didn't see my dad a lot of the time. And then audiences were like a surrogate affection machine. So I think that's when this lust for the love of an audience came. And hour and a half, 2 hours. It's quite surreal. I watch a lot of telly. I don't read a lot of books, but I know a lot of facts, which I sort of weave in between. I do a lot of stuff on history-based things, and I talked about the Romans. But you had stuff where Moses and Jesus came back, and then at the back of the St. Pat's Cathedral, and stuff like that. But it isn't heavily used, and I suddenly thought, I should go in there, because I love this subject anyway, because I think the future's written in Washington Square Park. And for 4 years, and then I got into stand-up, realizing I had to learn stand-up. It became the buzzy comedy of Britain. I started talking about it, but not wearing any makeup or anything. And they said, well, he said he's a transvestite, but is this sometimes not? And then they said, all right, he is a transvestite, but he looks a mess, looks like a small elephant. For ease of notification, transvestite, transsexual. Transsexual is just someone who's had has started having an operation in hormones and has gone further down the line. Right. And there should be gay, bisexual, and lesbian transvestites. deliver, because the bottom line of comedy is to be funny and the bottom line of acting is to be, and I don't think it's going to, I was wondering, is it going to go away? Is it a fad that's coming now and it's going to go away? 7, I remember some friends, they had this amazing Lego, we used to wake up. Anyway, so back to 7, then I was a morning person. After that, it was all down. Well, it does sound differently. I got so used to it now, I just sort of banter. But we can actually get a film career out of playing through America, because it was 10 marathons and my feet had started to heal. And I was running. I tried to do 27 marathons for Nelson Mandela last year. I'll go back and repeat that next. I was pushing at school, 17, 18. I wrote a really rubbishy play at 16, but I was desperately trying to get into stuff. And then I got good stuff at school, 17. I made a lot of people laugh when I was about 17, 18. I did something that was quite dramatic, but that couldn't help me at that time. Because I was scared of flying, so I learned to fly. And I found that to put the plane back down on the ground, you need a confidence bordering arrogance to say, this piece of singing to myself on a cold, rubbishy day. But I was quite confident at this point, putting out the tea cozies, these animal tea, which I liked the irony of. Then someone came and kicked. So I can choose to add in things. So I try and get as much control as you can. But you know, still the majority of people are sensible. But people, any immigrants get demonized, and they say that everyone's trying to sign. You know, I came from a lot of failure, so I just try to run marathons in South Africa and fail at that. But I go back. That is the story of my life. Keep going back and back and back and back, and that's Nelson Mandela. I get that off Nelson Mandela. And and when they're going to work it out, they're going to say that's the transvestite thing, and certain people have got it, and I'll go, yeah, that's me, I got it. And that's how it's going to work. And my thought on this is that if they were fighting back in the 6th of June, if English speakers, Americans, Canadians, British people, French coming up, so yes, I'm doing an Al Franken, Senator Al Franken, I'm going to be following. Oh, Eddie is like, yeah, okay. Well, what do you do? So I'm a student here, I'm from Kathmandu. I said, Kathmandu? Really? And I said, we speak good English. I said, do other people speak good English in Kathmandu? Can I play there? Things in life that one, you know, I try and do my things, but I never actually sat and worked out which parts of other people I would. So we're standing there talking like John got it to him, and then after about 30 seconds, a minute, he says, so
Die deutsche Satz in mein Kopf. Das ist gleich auch in Frankreich, wenn ich habe einfach so gleiche, ein Show, das ist ähnlich vom Show in London, the show in Los Angeles, Hollywood Bowl. Das Show ist meine Theorie. Humor ist für die Menschen universal, aber die References sind national. So what you're talking about. I was in the U-Bahn, and in the U-Bahn, people go, I don't know what that is. If you say I was in an underground tube, it's a dish, it's a Berlin thing. Okay. So it's the references that, and I come here and I talk about human sacrifice. Menschenopfer, ich rede auf Menschenopfer in the countryside, where people, as you know from your horrible time in the 30s, a lot of support came for extreme views from out in the countryside. People don't see much, and they say, well, I don't like these people, I like all these people, because they never come there, they never see them. So out in the countryside, that does not change the world. The major towns in German, he'll speak German, he won't speak any Italian. We know this, it's all genetics. The extremist papers, the extremist people, no, we're all humans. And I'm just a transvestite guy who's here talking rubbish, and it's intelligent rubbish. It's this Gute.
Was a king during the 300 years from William the Conqueror to Henry V, when in England we had French, the religious language, and everyone was writing it down and saying how it should be spelt. Anglo-Saxon English was
It's not the young. I played Moscow. I played St. Petersburg. That's not necessarily what Russia thinks, but it's what people are encouraged. People who are against them in Russia. That happened in Germany in the 30s. Germany got over that. We had it from Thatcher. We move forward. If you draw a graph from ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and we get there. So it's okay. I mean, stuff happens. Stuff goes backwards, and
has modest stillness and humility. But when the winds of war blow in,
a few political comedians have gone into politics. They prefer the freedom of being out. But humor does help in this because it makes things more light, and you can put forward your positive points, and then I suppose you take. And I believe there are some bad ones, and you've had some bad ones, and we've had some crappy ones, and now we have some. If there is a God, fine. Just calm down, explain World War II. Then they say, well, what about the Muslim God? And then everyone's going to get so angry. And I say, well, that's their God. I'm in Yemen geboren, so it's mein Pflicht.
It was a Spitfire there, and Donald Pleasant saying, "Can you fly any of these?" I said, "Yeah, I could fly the Spitfire." I could. I logically could, because I've learned on a Piper Alpha, which is. But all the logic is there. You know, all the stuff, all the basic equipment is there, so I could do it. Different people would argue, different countries would, with a Focke-Wulf 109 or something. Things were good, but it's just the and the Hurricane shot down more enemy planes. Except I went to a place called Mount View Road, and it wasn't Mount View, like they did a special, they did a film about the discovery of the DNA molecules. And doing stuff on artists and European television. It was very advanced. Yeah. And me and my whole family, who were connoisseurs, you were trying to do Planet of the Apes, but in cows. But humans to apes. In the trees, about 2 to 4 million years ago, we were in trees. So obviously we're doing a lot of... But I know a hell of a lot about military history. I know a lot about World War II. I know Norway was very involved. I know Sweden was less. Tribal fighting, it was part of the warrior culture, and something that we grew up with. And now, you know, it's obviously very boring. It's quite contentious. People disagree with it. Norway isn't it? Killing each other. You know, there was the fight down in the Balkans, and that was hellish, and that was a hellish war. But we seem to be anyway, you know, because they didn't actually have the war. But you know, Sweden used to be a huge Poland and Sweden place on it. And I've noticed in Scandinavia that you do lots of very dark dramas. That now the whole world is getting to know where lots of people are dying in those dramas, but not in actuality. Well, I'd come out 6 years before. So I'd actually come out in '85, and my career was taking off in '91. Okay. So I told friends, and then I sort of... Transvestite was a bad word. What a negative word. So I was TV. I am TV. And people said, you're television? It was TV and TS, transsexual, Tinder, and then trans. And so I said, okay, I'm transgender. And then someone said, I thought you were transvestite. You know, a boy was wearing a dress, and I heard about this, and I thought, well, and all the other kids thought it was funny, but I thought, no, that sounds, I'd like to wear a dress. I didn't know why. I couldn't work it out, and I still like girls. So I am this straight transgender, wannabe lesbian. Yeah, I'd say boy qualities. I know lad implies okay. And I never had that. I never said, go and get drunk in the bar. I never could get the drink. But very focused, wanted to be special forces, wanted to do paratroops and I feel, having just met guys from the SAS recently, what I've done is like civilian special forces. That's what my career has been. I'm doing stuff. Just one. Was that it? Oh, and I had a fight with some other, it was teenage kids, they give you the hardest time. Adults go, and I give off non-victim vibes. I give off non-victim vibes. That's quite 30 years worth of, I don't know what I'm looking at. Maybe not Nazis with knives out and whatever, but I will stand my ground. They say when you're riding a bicycle, claim the road, and it's better for you to, and actually looking at people. And if someone looks at me, I will stare them out. And I'm not sure if train station in Antibes, where I used to sleep on the bench there when I was about 18. You know, just live and let live, be cool. Everyone's got a right to be everywhere, you know. So the other performer I was working with, a stand-up, Yassine Bellous, he's known from being on comedy on television, and they went, hey, Yassine, so they knew him. That was interesting. So I thought, actually, I'm going to go back and stand next to Yassine. And so Yassine's going, what's going on here? Because he'd heard something's going on. You giving this guy a hard time? Good comedian, you know, he's a friend of mine. So you're cool with me, then you've got to be cool with him. And then, so then it was taking sides. And so they said, so he said, are we all cool now? And they said, sort of. And he says, okay, we'll do a selfie. And then the boys were not cool, and all the boys.
Finale is going to be what's going to happen to Toby, me, and he's not going to be sitting around eating Ample Hill. I had a kid on the subway, this was a few months ago, he came up to me and he was all shy, he was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and he went, you're the one who gets the bad guys. Social media, but one of the reasons I'm not on is because I look at it enough already. Yeah. So, yeah, I do want a classic rock story. Yeah. When I was 14 years old, I went for an audition that I wasn't sure what it was, and I walked in and I took a, and I had it for a couple years, and it was used when I bought it, and I never rotated the. Toby knows a lot of stuff, and he's a behaviorist of the group, so he's reading people, and he's you know, our show, it's a big, fun, silly action show. Yeah. So you know, as we've gone. Now that we're in the 3rd season, we've theoretical problems that could happen, but probably won't. Right now, we're doing a show called It's the Pits. Yeah, couldn't happen, it wouldn't happen, but it's fun to watch it maybe happen. And growing up in New York, White Castle was around. It was against the rules in my house. You know, you want a classic rock story. Yeah. When I was 14 years old, I went for, was at that moment, and I got a call that said, you got it. And I was like, cool, I don't know what it was. Out on stage. and stand with Billy Idol while he sang all those parts. I've been having a great time, and the show is have a lot of trouble fitting in the world, have found each other, and then we get hired by Homeland Security to solve all these problems and save humanity on a weekly basis, which we do. You're welcome. You know, I got really lucky with this, that I was just having so much fun, because we do like an action film. It got picked up and it's been doing really well. So I just have a great time doing it. So the show is loosely based on this guy's life, and he does get hired to help the government and help private companies with a lot of problems and solve it. But no, we mess a lot of stuff up, and it's a real heightened reality. And I think it's great for Monday nights that people really appreciate. They go back to work and love that movie, and I got to be a part of something that made people laugh and took their minds off whatever problems. This one, I found out about, someone told me about this, I heard they're doing another American Pie. And again, I was like, I think I'd know. And I was like, dude, it's not happening. And then I got a call a day later that it was really happening. And the way they got that together was they wrote a great script. Yeah. Falling apart over this season, a lot of relationships have been tested. The show has been getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole team is very worried about it, as are Walter. Starbucks, or for a company like this is a guy with an astronomically high IQ and a ridiculous. So yeah, you'd think that they'd be able to figure it out, but they can. Look, we all know that, you know, the best therapist in the world has no idea what to do. And I never once felt the need to put. I mean, you know, I think the Mets have gotten in trouble a lot over. I like to say it was a victory because I mean, I remember sitting here with you probably a year ago, and I think I said something like, I think Wilmer Flores is going to have an exceptional year. It was a success, and I think they exceeded expectations. I loved watching them go for it and go out, which was Terry's fault, which was not Matt Harvey's fault. It's Matt's job to say, I got to go out there. And it's not Matt Harvey who's your number one. Then a debate starts, you know, and then you got to pick one of them. Right. They're all incredible. They're all aces on any other team. The world is changing. Twitter's changing everything. So I want to see these guys go crazy. It's a show for, you know, have a crappy Monday, then come home and watch us break into Fortnite. Like you were saying about Kobe, Piazza has nothing to do with, right? But the Wilpons backyard, and they all pack into the tight little backyard, and I think they're crowded behind an above-ground pool as well. And so, I mean, I was there as a kid, so that was '86. So the Mets, and also when you're 5 years old and there's a player named Straw, because at this point we just want the #1 pick, right? So. Well, I actually don't know how it works. I mean, if you have the worst record in the NBA, to not sign him was the right move. Well, clearly. But it just felt like, give the fans something, and at that time, that's all. It was the right basketball move. Sure. But I'm looking for some love. I'm looking for some compassion, and we deserve it. It's been amazing. I really lucked out. You know, I was psyched to get on a TV show, and then I wound up on a really fun one. We're already a kind of thing, because I remember when we were doing it, like, they're doing another teen movie, because I think Scream had come out, and I think Can't Hardly Wait, and so we're like, this is great, we're doing a movie. But then it became... if it was a funny script, I mean, I didn't think they were going to do a fourth one. Yeah. When they did the fourth one, I heard about it. I was at an audition, and someone said to me, hey, man, they're making another American Pie. And I was like, no, they're not, because it's a ball. I can't play soccer at all, but the weirdest thing is, like, anyone can put anything on Wikipedia. Going into the show, everyone was like, oh, my God, the show was so great. Everyone was really excited about it. You know, it's a really unique blend of comedy and action and procedural and, you know, serialized romance stories. And we were excited that we had something special. But just like you said, there's so much. Battle depression or anxiety. Do you know what to do? Start reaching out by visiting activeminds.org. CBS.
No, now I understand. Now I understand why his new show, written by Hart Hanson, who created Bones, and that'll be on in November. And then other than that, I kind of had been earlier in my career. I played a lot of like the best friend, the goofy neighbor, you know. So I was playing a lot of characters were kind of along the same lines as Joey from Friends, and I was trying to make a transition into more leading man character type roles, and so I was going through a dry spell in my career, and I hadn't worked for. It took a little while for me to convince the business that I could play something other than what I had been playing. So when I walked into the test at Warehouse 13, I needed a job. I wanted a job. I had just had my second baby. My second son had just been born like 2 weeks before that. And you know, I was staring the reality of not having a job or any money, you know, squarely in the face. So there's 2 of each character. Well, when we walked in, there was like 7 or 8 Micahs and 7 or 8 P. You just kind of go, oh, they have no idea what they want. We're just a number here, and my chance of getting this job, Micahs and the Pete's, and going back and forth and going back and forth. And it kind of was, it seemed to me that you could kind of tell, at least I could tell, who they were paying attention to. And then the guy that went in right before me, the director came out, come here, and he put his arm around this guy and he walked down the hall with this guy, and I was like, with the regurgitated worm, and give up the worm, and I got no worm, man. I've got worm to give. And I was actually saying that out loud.
Unnatural. It's probably the worst part of being an actor, other than not being able. We were Craig Sheffer, and I'm like, oh no, it's okay. But then he goes, hey Craig, there's a guy over here that looks just like you. And so then Craig Sheffer could somebody will look like me someday, because I got this new show, Warehouse.
And normally, guys wear overalls, apparently, like and into your pants pockets. So there's no real pockets in the overall. And who wants to hang around waiting for your? The show every week is kind of a mini movie.
Okay.
It's not too serialized, so if you miss an episode, you won't get completely lost. And what's great about the show is I have a couple of boys. And the show doesn't talk down to the kids, and the adults can both watch at the same time and both find something that interests them and something that they can relate to. You know, it reminds me of the old days when they used to have the Walt Disney on Sunday night, the Disney movies on Sunday. The whole family would sit around and watch it, like, you know, when Kurt Russell did The World's Strongest Man and stuff like that. We don't take ourselves too seriously, but at the same time, there's some great drama. It's our exec producer calls it a thriller-omedy.
Yeah.
And that's why I think people should watch it, because I think everybody can relate to it. The artifacts in the warehouse are really just plot devices to get us to what the real show is, and 50% female viewership for a sci-fi show. Hi guys. Yeah, I mean, anytime someone has enough interest to fly you across the ocean and come to meet the fans of Warehouse 13, I say I'm doing something right. So yeah, I'm having a... I've been to Australia. I've been here to the UK a few times, to the MCM Expo. I've gone over to Paris a few times to do not cons, but to do press, and so I've been around. You know, well, there's a con called Dragon Con in Atlanta where there's generally 5 or 6 Ohuras with bunless chaps on. So anytime you can see an Ohura with bunless chaps, I say that's a good time right there. Bunless chaps here, but if there had been some, I would have had. You know, we kind of always roll our eyes at what's your favorite artifact or what's your favorite episode. No, I don't mind. My favorite artifact is Abraham Lincoln's hat, because Pete put it on and had an irresistible urge to free Mrs. Frederick. So I thought that was pretty fun. I thought that was a really just a good episode for the show. If you remember, it's part of the 2-part finale from season 3, where it made me feel a lot of pride for the show. I mean, the reason I like the show is that it has, you know, it has action, it has horror, it has romance. I mean, it's all the genres kind of wrapped up into one, and the kids can watch it too. You know, it doesn't talk down to kids, but still the adults can watch it. You know, Pete's been sober for 13 years. I'm also sober 13 years. That's a good one. I love comic books. I was never a Marine. But I have a great deal of respect for anybody who But yeah, I think there's a ton of myself in that. I don't know, a loose cannon that was supposed to be there, but the funny stuff, he's one of the funniest. I mean, he's one of the funniest, smartest guys on the planet that I've ever met. So I think the success of the show is because of him and because of Sci-Fi's willingness to let him do what he wants to do on the show. And I'm actually kind of in production with George A. Romero. We just finished a script that we're trying to get made for a new Dead movie called Road to the Dead. It's basically about humans have now exploited zombies because that's what we do as humans. We exploit everything, and we've taken the zombies and we've used them for our own entertainment. We've taught them to drive in kind of a death race where we watch them re-die. Thank you for giving me a career. Thank you for allowing me to have indoor plumbing at my house.
I was skiing with my family, and my manager was like, there's this role on Castle. I met my wife before she was my wife. I met this girl, and she was...
No, you wrote that on Twitter recently. Okay. I think it's a way to give back to them, people look at it and they're like, what, people come here, they save their money, they spend their money because they want to spend money on the things. The second most one that comes up is from Bones. I did a 4-episode arc on Bones as Cell for Feet. But my hair was a lot different. Everybody bags on me about that's the biggest, and it's really a great episode. If you like Mad Men, it's H.G. Wells is on the show this year, and we find out that H.G. Wells is actually a woman, because it was believed, or H.G. Wells believed, that people were more likely to believe that a man had written those stories than a woman. So she used a man's face, her brother's, as her, and wrote as H.G. Wells, but live as soldiers and train them, and then television. I mean, that's to me what it's all about. So to be able to do something like that would be. No, we haven't gotten the official green light from Sci-Fi on season 3, but I mean, it's pretty much that I thought for me would be my favorite is to have Janis Joplin's backstage pass from Woodstock, and whoever holds that backstage pass can travel through time to any concert that has ever been that they want to go to. So I could go to see, Led Zeppelin, Beatles, The Doors, Black Sabbath, CCR, the band, the Yardbird, my favorite music that I grew up on that my dad exposed me to. Just be a guy, a normal guy. It's like when I for the initial audition, I just played it as myself, because if I got the job, I just have to go to work and be myself. One of them being that everybody can watch the show. Yeah. It's not just, yeah. I mean, I like DC Cups and Roses around there, but we certainly love each other. And
no, the question that then comes up is people say, well, are you going to do a second trilogy? And I'm like, oh, I just finished this one. I think we gel really well, actually, and actually, this script was the first time we'd written together for quite a few years. I think I'm just trying to think, I guess that was probably like sort of 5 years since we'd written Hot Fuzz. When we had the story idea on the Hot Fuzz press tour in like 2007.
As well.
It was at Sydney Airport. It was when we were landing from Wellington to Sydney, and I sort of had the idea on the plane, and I was thinking about the script that I'd written when I was 21 about teenagers on a pub crawl, which I'd never done anything with. And I didn't necessarily want to make that film now, but I thought, well, maybe there's something in them being adults, and there's richer potential in the themes that me and Simon keep coming back to about perpetual adolescence. What if there's one guy that really wants to do this pub crawl again, and the other 4 aren't that fussed, forcibly regresses them, all hell breaks loose. Yeah. So I mentioned that idea to Simon, and then we immediately kind of sort of started hashing out the story. Right. But then when we came to write it, years later, it was good. We'd both had a break. We'd both done a lot of other projects, and it just sort of came out very sort of fluidly because we'd had a lot of time to think. Lodged in the memory,
right.
Like it didn't need any more hangovers and stuff. But I'd done one when I was 19, which is where the original script came from, which was a disaster. And
Right.
then in my late 20s or mid 20s, maybe after Spaced and before Sean, me and Simon and Nick ended up in my hometown, and we tried to do it again, and that went even worse. So I think sort of then it started to really strike me that this was like a pathetic sort of like attempt to recapture teenage glory. It came from really, and then the sort of the idea of the blue kind of ink inside, is because when I was a kid, it reminded me of school, so I wanted to make the actors all feel like they were back at school again by covering their hands with it. I didn't even tell Empire in London, like, sort of like, here's the thing, is I get very superstitious about like sort of talking about things before they're done, because I want to be the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
And you know, talk about something if it doesn't, you know, I mean, it will happen.
Yeah.
But it's, I feel very jinxy talking. Dressing, you know, based on the fact that the character is like grown up through this kind of pop culture, and that he is like living his big daydream. I sort of see the film as like a big daydream, is that Scott Pilgrim is like a character who's in this kind of, you know, sort of perpetual adolescence and hasn't really grown up yet, and he's living his life through the media that he consumes, and what the film is about at the end essentially is about him kind of growing up. So I won't go into that too much, because like sort of it's also something I haven't worked on that for 2 years. I have worked on this film solidly for 2 years. So the last time I actually did any work on Ant-Man, 8 weeks before I started doing Scott Pilgrim, and I wasn't around during the shoot at all, which was an enormous bummer, because I basically like had worked on a film with Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson, and then I wasn't actually around to be on the set at all. The boat, like, to actually watch that all in action. But in the case of that one, I didn't try and graft my own personality on it. We just tried to be true to Hergé. I think you have to watch anything before the new one. I would hope all 3 movies are standalone. Brian Forbes, The Stepford Wives, and Brian Forbes, 1975. I'd like to think that me and Simon and Nick would work together again. I mean, it was 6 years since Hot Fuzz, and you know, we really sort of moved everything else away so that we could make this one, and before it was too late. So I'm really he does these incredible vocal warm-ups just before a take, which is something to witness. That's quite something. I don't know. I actually, there's quite a few zombie things I have not seen. Books, comics, films, games. There's a certain part of me that kind of felt like I'd sort of... Barry King might win because I'm not sure that he'd fight entirely fair. Maybe Nicholas is amazing, and Brian's ending is great, and I don't think they really... We always knew it was going to be something slightly different, and Brian actually was involved in writing the final scene. We actually very involved in it, and he was very sort of happy with the idea that it would diverge. I think because Scott Pilgrim like touched on a number of genres like action, comedy, romance, fantasy, like action, it was always going to be a slightly harder sell. And I think, you know, like, I think it wasn't completely generic. Like, sometimes people just want, like, I have no idea what that is. So I think it's just down to sort of, if you're trying to do something slightly different, you just got to work twice as hard. And it was a tough film to kind of, like, sort of explain. So I think that's the... But on the flip side of it, like, I was very proud of the movie winner ever. And, but we all were very proud of the show. And we just had sort of faith in it, and then it eventually found its audience on DVD. So I sort of, when I went through the same thing on Scott Pilgrim, I just had to sort of have faith in what I'd made, and that it would get out there. And I feel that films that are massive, massive hits kind of like do their couple of months at the cinema, and then never get seen on the big screen ever again, or nobody ever wants to see them ever again. And what's really nice is that Scott Pilgrim, like, somewhere in the world is playing like a, you know, like the Prince Charles show all the time, and like the New Beverly in Los Angeles. And I like that. I think that makes me very happy that people are still seeing it with a crowd, you know, and also that it's, you know, I think sort of like, I think I already got all of that out of my system in Scott Pilgrim. I feel that, and this might be controversial to say, and maybe Duncan Jones with World of Warcraft is the man to beat it, but there has never been a good video game film. And I think so far, and the reason for that is it's just like, staring you in the face is that a video game is like a sort of a unique experience to you. You are playing the game, and just like watching somebody else. My answer is there is no game that I would like to adapt. Maybe Rampage, being so kind of impassioned about like sort of what the character. I mean, Chris Nolan's Batman is very different to Tim Burton's Batman, which is very different to Adam West's Batman. And there's room for all three. It sort of said, oh, is there anything you had to cut out? I was thinking, well, not really. I think we kind of went for it. I think my main thing, definitely though, what I mean is it makes it very kind of like challenging to kind of try and make it as it is. So, I kind of feel like that as a film fan. Sometimes I watch some summer films which you hear about that cost like 200 million, and you watch it and going, where did it go? Why did they spend it all on that one thing or something? And so, like, with this film, I'm just thinking, I just wanted to make sure, like, some people, it's the same way that some girls don't like being called cute. It's like, oh, you're really cute. Saying, I don't like that word. It's the same way that some guys are saying, oh, you're so nice. It's like, sort of like, I don't want to be nice. I want to be like, I want to be a terror. No, I don't really read too much other stuff that gets sent my way. But for some reason, I read this one, and I could see straight away why they'd given it to me. Actually, I think I read the first book. Kung Fu Hustle hadn't come out yet, actually, thinking about that. It was just after Shaun of the Dead. And just reading it, if anything, actually reminded me a bit of Spaced. So it was the chance to... Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, even though they have really ridiculous things in them, they both take place in a real world where, like, people die and don't come back. And it was interesting to me because it's both highly relatable, like it takes place in, it's essentially about a bunch of people in their teens and early 20s, but it's got a sort of a slightly magical feel to it in a world where anything... I think it was pretty instinctive. I don't know what a straighter version of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World would be. When people sort of have asked me, how far is too far, and I was thinking, I don't really know how to soft pedal a film like this. I think it's, especially when you read the source material, and and what it's about and the tone of it, it felt like it was a license to let my imagination run riot a little bit, and I think that's what's kind of like that's fun and fresh about it. Like when people have asked me that, I kind of pondered, thinking I don't know what a straight version of Scott Pilgrim would be. The whole raison d'etre of the whole piece is that you're essentially seeing the film that's playing in Scott Pilgrim's head. And that Scott Pilgrim is a character in his early 20s who has grown up on Saturday morning cartoons and comic books and video games and probably too much sugary product. And you're watching kind of like how he would like to live. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I definitely was that kid at school. When I was at school, at comprehensive, I was short-sighted. I didn't know I was short-sighted until I was 20. And as such, I would frequently look out of the window, like it's in classes, because I couldn't see the blackboard properly, and doodling kind of like rock bands, not unlike Sex Bomb on my school book. Even like the look of Sex Bomb when they're playing and they have kind of lightning bolts and jagged lines coming out. I would describe it to the animators. I said it should look like a 14-year-old's idea of a rock band. And so, Scott Pilgrim was a character who's 22, but sometimes he acts like a 12-year-old, and I can definitely empathize with him. Was around. So Scott Pilgrim is an interesting character because like he's quite a flawed hero. You get the feeling that he would get distracted by like sort of a burrito as much as he would the next kind of gorgeous girl that walks by. Yes and no. It was a pretty organic process. I mean, we had a structure worked out as far back as 2000. New material as it kind of came together. Brian, when we first started writing, we had 3 books, and then it kept developing right up till shooting. So even the 6th book, we knew how it was going to end, and then we even did, that reflected like some of the final sort of passages of book 6. So it's been a good organic process. There were times that we worked in tandem. There were times when Brian took some lines out of the screenplay and put them in the books, which was very sort of pleasing, so there's a couple of lines in volume 4 and 5 that come from our screenplay.
Really?
Like what we did, like the World's End is a real pub name. In fact, there is like several in the UK. There's one in particular that me and Simon used. I'll see you at the World's End. I'll meet you at the World's End. So when we wrote the names, to illustrate what was happening in each one. So like we wanted them to feel like tarot cards. It's like the name of the pub tells you. It's like film is a visual medium. Like sort of, you know, if you're like locking it to the ground, you may as well be at the theatre. Aliens literally represent kind of like that loss of identity is like this sort of like sometimes absolutely. Like I think sort of with this it was definitely like sort of because it was the culmination of like Sean and Hot Fuzz, which are all genre films. We wanted, you know what, my script didn't like feature that at all, so like it wasn't like it's not a problem for me, you know, like.
You would want the audience to see it as the journalists see it, which is cold. So why would you want to spoil it? I think it's like. No, I think it's just it's pretty obvious is that you want people to see it like not saying goodbye to English films at all, or British films rather. I mean, definitely trying to draw a line under a certain theme that has been in our work since Spaced actually, and then especially in Sean and then Hot Fuzz, is there's a lot of, you know, a theme about perpetual adolescence, and I think we wanted to do something that was a final word on that. And you know, Sean was about a man growing up, but actually like this film was about a man trying to regress. Like Gary King genuinely wants to be like a teenager again, and he's going to actually drag his friends back into that like sort of juvenile antics. So it was a sort of a film about regression and about the perils of like nostalgia and like how it's dangerous to go backwards and like how you can never go home again. So we thought like, you know, we both me and Simon are from like small towns and came to London. So whenever we go back, it's always a strange and sometimes bittersweet experience. And we thought that was a great kind of like template for a sci-fi parent. Absolutely. No, I would never rule anything out. It's definitely, I don't know why people would think it was a goodbye to the UK. In fact, you know, I had a blast making this film, and it was because I haven't really started on it, so I don't have a lot to discuss. Together. And even to the point where there's the big kind of sonic face-off between two bands, is in like the summer of 2008, I asked Nigel Godrich to get involved in the film. It's the first score he's ever done, but prior to that, way before, like 18 months before, we started to get the artists together to portray the different bands. Hollywood song in the film, why doesn't Dan do that? And so he did the Patel number. Cornelius, who I'm a huge fan of, hear Sex Bomb playing, was designed in the title sequence to be a lot shorter. The title sequence was really short, and then we actually expanded the title sequence. The opening song changed. One of the songs that was going to be on the end credits, Nigel sort of said, "Oh, you can't stick that song on the end credits. Surely that should be the one that you're shooting it." Thinking, this sounds great, you know, maybe we should. So it went far away from the original idea of hearing or not hearing the song. It feels, in that respect, you know, it does start to feel like a more like a 70s film, like Phantom.
Some of that stuff is the Wetter Boys. We kind of we worked kind of hard at trying to make the plot and the characters work. So some of the kind of snowy stuff and some of the references, like say the kind of, you know, the crab with the gold. I was wondering if they had opium in them actually at the end, but when snow, that a lot of that stuff is the Wizards at Wetter kind of putting Tintin references into the corner of every frame. I guess the sort of, if there's a favourite one, I think Hergé drawing Tintin's portrait right at the start. There was a thing that like John Hurt would be a good calculus, but then somebody pointed out that John Hurt plays calculus in the Lunk. Maybe as like a pantomime Thompson, I could be one of the Thompsons and have like a mannequin next to me as another. Okay, so this one, it was something where the genre, like a lot of sci-fi movies, is that sort of the genre came out of like a manifestation of the fear in a way, and the movie is about people returning to their hometown and realizing that time has marched on without them. And Simon's character is a man who's 40 who wants to be 18 again. So like the kind of the aliens in the movie essentially represent the kind of that fear of change and that loss of identity. So this sort of the things came together. It's actually like I literally like when I was like in my mid-20s, when I sort of used to go back to my hometown every like kind of like holidays, like I would like sort of, you know, get increasingly kind of like sort of bemused by the fact like, oh, like nobody remembers me, like none of the bartenders remember me, the school bully doesn't remember me. It's like it's not so much that I never left, it's like I was never here. And I remember saying to a friend of mine like way back, I said, oh, every time I go back to my hometown it feels like Invasion of the Body Town. So like little ideas like that like stick, is like, okay, you can never go home again, you feel alien, like a bigger reason. And in the movie, like sort of like, so all of these things sort of came together. It's like we wanted to do a movie about kind of like the dangers of nostalgia and like a man trying to turn back the clock and, you know, but then even just the thing of like a homecoming is that sort of like of it is as much a coping strategy for me and Simon as it is for Gary King. Is that like he's almost, there's a scene in the movie where he finds out that like something's afoot and he's happy when he's talking. He can accept that more readily than the idea that he's getting older, like that he's not as big a legend as he thinks he is, and that the town wasn't all it was cracked up to be anyway. So I think in this particular case, it was something like, this is the story which is like sort of like the sci-fi is a manifestation, like something's afoot, and he's happy when he's talking about it. And the reason he's happy is he can accept that more readily than the idea that he's getting older, like he's not as big a legend as he thinks he is, and that the town wasn't all it was cracked up to be anyway. So I think in this particular case, it was something like, this is the, because it's like a satire and stuff, we draw a very sharp line in the sand at the end. With the drunk humans, you only have one choice. Right. There is no middle ground. Right. You know, so, but then like what the movie is about, like, is the, you know, like our hero, like Simon's character in it, is extremely flawed and is like makes a lot of bad decisions and does some terrible things. You know, like, and he's very questionable, like, in his motives a lot of the time. And yet, when it comes down to it, is that what makes us human is, like, the fact that we are flawed and make mistakes. The key is, can you learn from your mistakes? So that we wanted to make something which, like, sort of, like, you know, it has this kind of, like, big sort of philosophical sci-fi climax, but with drunk people, which we plans other than that we'd like to work together. And, like, I think the thing is, like, sort of, like, and we're very proud that we did this third movie. And as much as fans wanted us to do another one, we wanted to do another one. You know, but the other thing is that the sort of that maybe fans don't know is how hard it is to get these movies made. So, like, you know, if you want us to do another film, set up specific criteria for these movies is that they're all like genre films that are really like Trojan horses for the relationship movies. Like they're all about like perpetual adolescence. Loss of identity, the individual versus the collective. They're all about growing up those themes. So I think that means if we did another film together, we might do something. Because all three of the movies, Hot Fuzz, Sean, and this one, they all have endings that like...
Going for sci-fi film, I like the film, Saul Bass's film, Phase 4, which is a... And it's really spooky. It's kind of like a mix of super macro lenses. So it's a really spooky film. Good performances, really great photography. I watched it on TV when I was a little kid, and then like it's finally come back. Spanish director who only did one other film, which is also a lesson, but it's about a couple that go to a Spanish island where kids have taken over. The kids don't say anything, and it's kind of it's like The Birds with little kids, and it's particularly like grim and spooky. It was also known in the 70s as Island of the Damned, and both films by that director, both greatly. That's really worth watching. It's by the same team that did a charity event in this village, which then gets taken over by terrorists. So then the Olympic is so much fun. Born to Fight. I highly recommend it. I've been trying to get hold of a print of it because I want to show it to an audience because I watched it on DVD and it's just obscure, but it was for quite a while quite difficult to get hold of. Is Dario Argento's Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which is, I think, and then the title itself, I probably shouldn't tell you what the title refers to because it kind of gives away like a great warm-up to that, basically. So that's a little bit more, in preparation for Hot Fuzz, called Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man. And then there's this acoustic duo who are singing sort of sappy in this kind of hippie wasteland. And it's one of those films, it has big dance numbers in it. It's got sort of quite a big budget, but like amazing, bizarre design. The choreographer. And then years later, I ran into him in LA and he remembered me and said, "Hey, how's it going? Been watching your films." I said, "You didn't tell me about the apple." I wanted to know all about the apple. That's definitely worth watching. It has an amazing ending where it looks like they ran out of money or something happened where just as it's getting to what should be its third act, the film abruptly stops with an intervention by God. Literally, like, in one scene, one of the characters says, "Mr. Tops is coming." And Mr. Tops turns out to be John. You would watch it and you kind of think, this is so cruel. This is like a sort of an extreme prank. Deserves the prank. So I would say, like, some people who watch it say, "Oh, this film is so cruel," and yet there are some amazingly funny bits in it. It definitely can get it on DVD. I'm not sure I ever saw a theatrical release, so it did do festivals, but it's called Windy City Heat, and I would recommend it. I wouldn't necessarily condone it. I would never make the movie like his French film Point Blank, which I presume is called something else in France. You can get it on a BFI DVD, and it's actually a short, and basically they all die horribly, and when each one dies, I'd always I didn't know what the title of it was. I missed the title, and then much later I found it was called Apaches, and it's directed by John Mackenzie, and it's on a BFI DVD called like Stop, Look and Listen. One of those is a little known 1995 film called A Fistful of Fingers. It was directed by Edgar Howard Wright. He was 20 at the. You might look out for a young, fresh-faced 20-year-old actor called Edgar Wright, who appears in one scene before briefly getting shot. It also features Jeremy Beadle, R.I.P. True, Jeremy Beadle is in the movie. I believe the director had to make it like pad it out to get to 78 minutes. Where's Matt Cardle now? One Direction are the biggest. They're going to go down to Earth and take over. So then, Harry Styles and the aliens all bow down, and then you just have to pretend to be Harry Styles. I would be stuck on that lion in Trafalgar Square, and I would know that particular issue of Time. It would mean nothing anymore, because I'd just be on that lion. That'd be like my little kind of like the little sort of safe haven that's going to last for like 72 hours, and then I would probably give myself up to the zombies. I'd be so like hungry.
Well, one, thank you for not asking an Ant-Man question, and B, no, it's true. I am developing a horror movie. It's funny because people always ask me if I'm ever going to do a film of Don't, and A, I wouldn't because I think you've already seen the funniest version of that, and B, I want to do a straight horror movie, and I have this idea for like, I guess it's like doing like an English giallo type movie. I really like those kind of dreamy like.
You're right, and this is a hastily written list of my favourite films of 2013, but with a disclaimer because it's the 26th of November. And there are a lot of awardsy films that come out in the last couple of months of the year that I have not yet seen. So this does not include the following films because I have a great film, Short Term 12, with Brie Larson, Woody Allen's Blue Jasmine. I saw that twice, and my favourite film of the year. Another film that's quite divisive, but I loved it, is Harmony Korine's Spring Breakers, which I favorite from the year, which I've seen twice on the big screen, and would plan to see a third time. It would be Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity, which I think is extraordinary, and I recommend.
Service is mostly comedic actors, and then the rest of the village of Sanford are played by real living legends and proper like thesps. Yeah. So that was fun to do, and it was to have those people in a big ensemble and to be playing off them with different actors from different generations. We haven't really got the budget to kind of like be sort of just riffing endless.
I can't quite believe it either, actually. It was like sort of, because it actually was like, I'm very pleased with the end result, but it was I felt, how did we do it in 12 weeks with all the fight scenes? And I said, well, the trade-off is that to get to shoot like, going to happen then we tried, once we had what the scene was, we tried to knee. And I was sitting on the plane, and I had, I think it was around the time that Superbad was about to come out. And I was thinking about that film, and I see myself in Gary King a little bit as well, and I think you've got to have sympathy for your characters, because even though the character like the Simon plays is like a sort of walking car crash of a man, he's still like, he hits rock bottom, but he still kind of rises up to be a hero. That's important, is that you've got to kind of like we don't write characters that we don't have.
Like 2 weeks ago. So it still feels pretty fresh to me. So, like, it's always funny when people watch a new film and they say, "So what's next?" I said, "Why don't you just watch this?" We literally just finished it. Like, you at least hold up to like about 3 or 4. So I feel very nice in terms of like this film that make me quite kind of like emotional, like just watching them in a way, because I think in a similar way to Sean, it gets kind of as well as it being like funny and action packed, it gets kind of a bit deeper emotionally sometimes. And friends who have a rift, and I think a lot of people have that experience of like sort of the people that you thought when you were 19 you were going to be best friends with forever, maybe you're not as close anymore, and it's really a film about. Well, the theme of nostalgia in the movie is obviously very strong. It's almost like it's Gary's worst enemy. If anything, the villain of the piece in the movie is nostalgia, because like Simon's character Gary King, is convinced that he wants to relive his 1990 glory days, and it's that thing of like you should be careful what you wish for, because when they do attempt to recreate it, things go badly wrong. And also, you know, what the film is about is that sort of the difference between your kind of like rose tinted like sort of memory of the past and the reality of it. And so, and then once you add alcohol into the mix, it becomes like this kind of like time machine sending you back to being teenagers again. So it's definitely, the whole film is like a bit of a in terms of like the other actors in it, it was definitely important to us that it wasn't so much about, well, there's a couple of things. You're right about Spaced, is that the one person from Spaced who hadn't been in any, we had written a role for him in Shaun of the Dead, which then got cut out. He didn't shoot it, we just cut it out of the script. Hot Fuzzy was supposed to, and then we wanted to also make sure that the people who were in the first two movies, 1 and 2, like Hot Fuzz and Shaun, would also be in this one. So that's quite... I think it's because I grew up in a small town in England. You know, like Wells in Somerset, where I grew up, is very pretty. So as a result, I feel like sort of like most of the films that I've made have some larger form of escapism in them, in terms of, and Space is no different, about like, here's my mundane. And this is different in a way in terms of it's actually sort of like, you know, at the start of the movie, epic night as being like the sort of the most action-packed night ever. And then the irony is when he tries to recreate it, it really becomes... It only really comes challenging when it comes into marketing and stuff, because I think if you had to cut together a trailer that said it was just about friends drinking in the pub, then I think a 20th of the audience would go. So you have to at least hint that there's going to be some kind of like sort of, you know, like big scale kind of action and special effects. So there's lots of things that aren't in the trailer that we have kind of kept to ourselves. But, you know, you've got to put enough action and special effects into the trailer so people will come.
That's true. I mean, I was so exciting. I was reading, I'm going to fight against Governator. I'm going to fight against Terminator. I'm going to fight against Arnold. So he was like, I grew up watching his film. I feel so honored to be here and to be part of this movie and to fight against an action movie. It's a Hollywood movie. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger's. Then we got a Korean director who is a really special guy, really personal director, with his own personality to this movie. So he's gonna be a really...
Feel my injuries in my ass. That's a really common thing. Que se llama Fulgencio Argüelles y que además fue un libro que me acompañó durante la preparación del western de Blackthorn de Mateo Hill, porque era se llama El Palacio Azul de los Ingenieros Belgas. Es un libro maravilloso, es una novela, pero con un lenguaje que efectivamente se transforma en una conversación y que ya no es pregunta. Bueno, solo el trabajo que estuvimos durante 6 meses investigando en la vida del Che Guevara, yo decía, tantos departamentos, allí supongo que hasta un cierto punto és inevitable que ante un...
Filmax és una productora amb la que havia fet una pel·lícula jo abans, Transsiberian, i tenia molt bona experiència amb ells, i el Pau Freixas no el coneixi, i em va la vida quan rodo, quan treballo i quan faig un personatge, no? I solament vull, doncs, normalment tens una entrevista a mail i parles del projecte, i jo, no? Que sigui gent que l'apassioni aquesta feina i que sigui conscient de la dificultat que ara mateix significa rodar. És molt complicat. No sé, havia molts elements en aquest projecte que jo volia. No, és broma. No, el Ricardo està passant, el meu personatge està passant un moment molt complicat. Potser en 2 setmanes assajaves 2 dies, aleshores era molt poc temps, en veritat, no? Rodaves molt poc i jo, en el meu cas, marxava...
Desde el punto de vista del actor es muy difícil acercarse al Che Guevara, al hombre al que yo pretensión, en una familia de clase media alta, y aspiraba a que su hijo fuera un doctor, que para eso tenían dinero y lo habían preparado. Entonces siempre fue una responsabilidad. Es un personaje que todo el mundo ha oído hablar, todo el mundo tiene una opinión sobre el Che Guevara, todo el mundo va a señalar la pantalla y va a decir, pero es una película que ya tiene un punto de atracción. Tenemos un debate de lo que sea, pues tenemos unas ideas que hemos pensado, que no es lo que intento hacer yo cuando trabajo un personaje, es no es latinoamericano o africano intentando hacer una revolución. Le tocó actuación que él consideraba injusta, pero a su vez deja una recién nacida atrás, o sea que se sensibilizó con ese viaje en Diarios de una motocicleta, habla de este viaje cuando él tenía 20 años, Y llegó a la conclusión en que había que hacer algo porque aquello era insoportable, ¿no? Y le afectaba como si le estuviera sucediendo a él cuando él venía de una familia común. Hay un libro que me he leído de Ignacio Taibo, que me gustaba mucho porque contaba muchas anécdotas que te hacían conocer más a la persona y no necesariamente todas eran positivas. De sus hijos, bueno, iba, volvía, venía, pero para él lo más importante era la revolución. Y vivía para la revolución. De hecho, cuando se instala en Cuba o con lo que fuera, y lo primero que le dice el Che, dice, ¿tú qué has venido? ¿A hacer fotos? No. Bueno, desaparece de la vida pública al viajar al Congo y le escribe una carta. Llevaré siempre a Cuba en mi corazón, pero ya no soy más cubano. Es decir, dejaba la lucha armada cubana porque consideraba que había otros lugares donde le necesitaban más. Entonces, la vuelta a Cuba ya se hace... pasa por Cuba para supuestamente la revolución de manera distinta y entonces cuando hay gente que ha acusado incluso a Castro, al Che, el Che pecó de ingenuidad. El Che había triunfado en Cuba y pensaba que de la misma manera iba a triunfar en cualquier país. Cuando que un gobierno revolucionario se mantenga en el poder durante 40 años, ya por ideología, centísimo, superdotado. Castro con 4 o 5 años le escribe una carta al presidente de Estados Unidos para que le envíe $1, porque nunca había visto un billete. Era un tipo que vive la situación dictatorial en Cuba, con el apoyo de los Estados Unidos, vive todas las revueltas, un general o un comandante, el que estuviera allí al mando, y hay una llamada de teléfonos. Dada la importancia de lo que habían hecho, algunos soldados negaron haber... Afortunadamente no hay monotonía nunca, porque saltas de la revolución con croma, con una pared verde, pero también con doble, está muy picado, de tal manera que hay cerca de 400.000 prostitutas en España, de las cuales 50.000 están explotadas. Hay elementos que para mí fueron novedosos e interesantes, como el viaje que hace uno de los hermanos, hasta ocupar el lugar del otro, y bueno, y sobre todo Aranda hace un cine suyo, propio, tremendo, y el personaje sale desnudo a la calle porque es algo improvisto. A mí personalmente me hubiera gustado. Me parece distinta, no es una peli de acción al uso, es comedia, es acción, es gore, vuelve a la comedia, drama, todo con una estética western, no sé. Me interesó desde el primer momento, aún siendo muy consciente de que era una rareza, que nos gustaría ser en un momento, en una ensoñación, creo que tiene una relación de amor-odio con el expresante. El director me decía, hay que hacer un tipo atractivo, y yo le decía, joder, es un psicópata despiadado dentro de un coche, no se puede hacer un rasguño porque complicaría mucho la producción y ahí está todo muy medido. Pero he tenido oportunidad de conducir el coche y además he tenido oportunidad donde era, bueno, pues dar a tope un acelerador en un maizal donde no ves nada de la orientación, y por el ruido de las mazorcas era imposible saber si ibas derecho, si ibas hacia un lado. El walkie que te están gritando derecha e izquierda, perdías el sonido por el ruido y digo, me voy a estrellar, va a aparecer el otro coche. Había momentos donde tú tenías oportunidad de vivir realmente lo que vivía el personaje, pero luego también hay que tirarte mucha imaginación, porque hay planos donde los hace un especialista, un piloto profesional, hay otros planos donde el que conduce va arriba en el techo con pedales y con un volante y con casco, un piloto profesional, y tú vas abajo sin ningún control sobre los mandos, lo cual da muchísimo vértigo porque el coche está a punto de estrellarse y hace derrapadas y tú vas dando al freno. No funciona, obviamente, porque el que va conduciendo va arriba, ¿no? Pero bueno, es una oportunidad de disfrutar los directores, y con Ed Harris, por supuesto, estar en una película con él. Y eso es un puro western, nada que ver con la producción francesa, La Bella y la Bestia. O sea que, por suerte, puedo hacer cosas completamente distintas, intimistas, una relación de pareja. Bueno, pues por suerte salto de un proyecto a otro.
That's true. I mean, I was so exciting. I'm gonna fight against Governator. I'm gonna fight against Terminator. I'm gonna fight against Arnold. So he was like, I grew up watching his film. I feel so honored to be here and to be part of this movie and to fight against him and
No problem. One day I was rushing in to do the work. About halfway through the recording, decide how good or how much I liked it, till I saw the third. Being freed with the sting of death so he could join his wife wherever she might be. Well, we know of your love and adoration of your wife.
Conveyed the word to my successful older brother in Kansas City and the Kansas City Kansan, that is, the smaller paper, to say I was doing it showed actor 1, 2, and 3 doing the radio show, and then it would cut to all the phenomenal vignettes that were taking place around the country, the people who took the show for real. And they, of course, were the featured performers. And when I saw that that article had come out with my picture, I wanted to crawl in the deepest hole possible.
I just crossed my ankles. My leg felt so heavy. I just tried to take the weight off of it by putting reading, which is a euphemism for saying it stunk as far as. So I realized that. So they said, when we have you back, which all out, right, with Mary. And I thought, crazy, wiggy, wild, wall out. And when I walked out of the room afterwards, they laughed very much. When I walked out of the room, it took us 2 years to realize how to do it right. We had good shows in the meantime. We won Emmys. Going from, it's 180 degrees difference. And nobody, producers, writers, crew, nobody knew what it was like to try to take a half-hour comedy show with 3 cameras and make it a 1-hour drama with unadulterated heaven. We were all very happy. We had,
who was running MTM at the time, came back, had just come back from New York. The scheduling, and I got a rumor or two. I hear stories that we're in trouble. I was just there. If I thought we were in trouble, I would have stayed there and fought for it. Been canceled had it not been for the controversy that arose over my stand on El Salvador. To be taken down to El Salvador with drugs and medicines for the people in the hills who weren't getting it, the campesinos. It was also to call attention to El Salvador by this act, which is why we gathered in Washington. As with the strike, because I had the viable show on TV, I delivered the speech of announcement for the organization. Said, Mr. Edna, you say you're in favor of free elections in El Salvador. Well, what if that election turns out a communist? I went on to answer another question, and all the time in my brain I'm saying, have I come this far? So I turned back to that guy again after I answered the next question. I said, I wasn't satisfied with my answer. What I would want to say is that, so I turned back to that guy again after I answered the next question. I said, I wasn't satisfied with my answer. What I would want to say is that a lot of controversy arose up. A couple of congressmen wanted to lead a boycott on Lou Grant. I had the newspaper in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and he wrote the editorial. In any other country, Edward Asner would be taken out and shot. But, you know, blah, 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 thank God this is America, and so forth and so on. And you felt the regret that this wasn't any other country for him. Sent me a letter showing what they had done. They'd called in to say that Kimberly Clark saying that they wanted to express their appreciation at their sponsorship of the show, and they would continue to grant. We are pleased or proud to inform you that we will no longer be sponsored. So 2 out of 3 were Brits. This is at a point where one producer said, we think there are 2 ways of doing things. The way the show does it and the way you're doing it. We think our way is at me, primarily by Charlton Heston, among many others. And I would answer either acerbically or honestly, or honestly. But it seemed to require a response. Silence did not seem, of course, had I been more sophisticated, I would realize it would now lead to another response. And it would refeature their initial attack. The Guild voted to support Vanessa Redgrave in her lawsuit against the Boston Pop. Was requested formally to support her in this effort. And I, as president of the Guild, voted for it as well. The JDL wanted to make an example of me. Second Sunday, about 30 or 40 of them showed up. My wife and kids are appearing. And it's a small hillside street, Roscommare. People are driving up and they're taking up a lot of the street, and the cops are trying.
Public opinion turned against this government for keeping the government in power, who sponsored death squads, turning, what they eventually do is turn the peasants into communists, and yet they accept the fact that it's justified that we're there. We're losing men. I've paid the price already. My show got canceled, but my guts won't let me keep my mouth shut. So, I've paid the price already. My show got canceled.
Looking for a show to come back with now that Raymond Burr was this thing starring Jim Hutton, and I was cast as a police chief. Wally Grauman was directing. Funny stuff to do. And I turned him into a comedic police chief. Doug Selby, DA. He had already acquired Jim Brooks and Alan Burns to prepare the pilot for Mary. They didn't know my work, but they then turned and asked Ethel Wynant can beautifully and eternally gratefully from me, said Ed Asner can do anything. So they sought me out and I read. And, I avoided comedy because I was always worried, how would I repeat the laugh? So I read for them, and when I finished, Jim Brooks said, well, that was a very intelligent. Well, when we have you back to read with Mary, we want you to read Wiggy, Crazy, All Stops Out. And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Why don't you have me read it that way now, and if I don't pull it off, don't have me back. Now, I have never made such mind, soul statements such as that in my life. I've always crawled in for jobs and generally crawled out. They said, well, we do have another appointment, but they laughed like hell. They said, read it just like that when you come back to read with Mary. Just tried to remember all the nutty things I did and wanted to repeat. I found out years later when I left, Mary turned to them and said, are you? And they got enough to satisfy themselves. They had a number of people. Gavin MacLeod was in to see them just before. I found out years later when I left, Mary turned to them and said, are you sure? And the response was, that's your Lou Grant. So I guess they wanted to see how much of a jerk I was willing to make myself.
I'd probably be more grandiose, make it less inward. Now we'll work together. I stabbed her good with that delivery. I'm delighted to appear on CBS again after they abruptly canceled my show.
Talk about 9/11 for the rest of the afternoon. I'll be glad to participate. There's an organization called 2,000 Architects and Engineers on 9/11 who challenge the story of how 9/11 happened or how it could have. People wish to be bobbleheads. They wish to do this or allow this to be done to itself or authority. So that takes care of at least a majority. I don't know. But I think for people to ask that question, to bring the liberals out in force, plus the fact perhaps they believe all of the information that is talked about the evils of assault and the purity of the rebel movement. Maybe they choose to believe that and make it simplify for them. I'm sure there is a segment of the anti-war movement, less bellicose party, the Democrats, although it's hard to tell the difference. I'm not pleased with the president's performance, with or without. Hollywood actors are at least putting out some semblance of beauty or style. Or unfair to list them as part of the 1%. It would be much better spent on the corporations who get away with not paying taxes, on the corporations and individuals who get away with. I don't think there are that many Hollywood actors who are stealing money these days. It's been a somewhat chaotic to sell all kinds of American products. We have been different. I would love to see the fact that most people could understand what socialism means and wonder how it benefits the individual and how there are various socialist practices at work in this country, even though we're a corporatocracy. But I would like to see it advanced even more so that our people, to read in the paper how many in Congress vote against food stamps and at the same time take millions of dollars aid from the government for their agricultural farms. If the exposure would be widespread, who is this guy? There's a guy from Tennessee, I believe. I can't remember his name. $3.2 million he got from the government last year, and he voted against food stamps. And most of those Republicans, and most of them are Republicans, fall into his corporatist agenda. And that's the other thing I wanted to point out.
the so-called anti-war liberals in Hollywood who haven't spoken up, I think they read the figures and they see that the vast majority of the American people are against another war, yet another war, and they were stung at their treatment with George Bush in Iraq. So they felt that it was not an urgent case for them to rush forward on this one with the majority of the American people. I also think that we have finally reached a point in this country where enough people are educated and enough people are looking, are witness enough to history to see that we gun up, rev up, jazz up another war to kickstart the economy. We have done it too many times. Vietnam was found, there was even some talk about Korea. Grenada was a bunch of, and I think it serves our country wonderfully well. Not to, or if we're going to fix the world, let's do it with Band-Aids, right? And my son has a son who is autistic. So we are directly affected. We wish to call the attention of this, call people's attention to it. Make people aware of it, realize it. Some say it's environment, some say, some have tried to say that it was. And it falls within a spectrum that has commanded more and more attention as we
I also felt that they would, I wanted to do it, and not because I really wanted to do that character, but to think that they wouldn't get enough white actors to support them in this venture. Whether it was the fact of impending failure that made Freddie Silverman.
Elvis had his entourage of good old boys with him at that time, and he was going through his karate phase, so his fingers were all being broken.
The shows were the funniest shows I had seen since I'd been in California, the best. And I was enormously blithe about when will we have had a chance to do such wonderful characters and such a wonderful show, plenty of times, that with the resources given to him, should be expected to have Ted Baxter as his newsman and to hire Mary Tyler Moore, totally inexperienced. I suppose so. I don't know where one stopped. He still was more idealistic and more sappily sentimental. In the 7 years of Lou Grant, I would say that I used a lot of my brothers, their devilish aspects. But when I got into somber Lou Grant of Lou Grant, and there were 2 shows left, and Jay had a vacation, start rehearsing, and all the jokes are about death, and they were not chuckling too loudly at this particular show. Very worried about it. And there were 2 shows left, and Jay had a vacation, start rehearsing, and all the jokes are about death and past, and they were not chuckling too loudly at this particular show. Very worried about it. We're about, it's either 5 or 6 minutes short, and this show is so nicely, tightly written. David Lloyd wrote it because we believed in the perfect roundness of the show. The first scene, Gavin comes in and starts spouting the one-liners about Chuckles, born on a trunk died. That the audience came in on the laughs and participated in the fun fest. Well, that won from the audience. By the time we finished the show, we had gotten Alan and Jim to produce the show because I trusted them. So I signed the deal with CBS, and I guess they clinched Alan and Jim. Out of that, they brought Gene Reynolds on, who's the most unbelievable researcher in the world, and he went all over the country to coach and guide us. I was placed under orders by Alan and Jim. We're not going to be down on the set like we were with the 3-camera show. It's up to you to maintain the flame of Lou Grant, who the character is, and keep him alive, and so on and so on. And I got down on that floor and with a single camera and a new crew and so forth and so on, and began slogging through the first show, and grimacing on that set to punch whatever I'm finding funny and to make sure that the audience knows this is a laugh here and this is my old stunt there. I was becoming a nervous wreck. And that went on for about 6 or 7 shows, and I was having a miserable time. I didn't last long with this guy, but one of the prizes I did get from him is after the show. And I don't know that you can see the slightest bit of difference between that show and this show. Gun control, which nobody seems to want to touch at that time. During the vast majority of the Mary Tyler Moore show, I was the chief. I was the 600-pound gorilla. And I felt like such a fish out of water because I'd gotten this unbelievable plum given to me by Charlie, and I thought I knew newspapers and journalism fairly well.
That they could mean something to him and he could mean something. The stories I could have heard, the companionship we could have had. I was the youngest of 5, so the others were all running interference. The coal miners were striking at the time, and among other things, and I said, well, you got to do something about those strikers. And I think that influenced me in terms of any union activities the rest of my life. I had a great journal, and I figured he witnessed a lot that he didn't talk about, but he was a beautiful, my sisters, they were a great both were social workers at one point. Great, my brothers were strong and bright and sharp in their psyche. I became an actor on 2 grounds. It allowed me to escape into my romantic, it was safe adventure. Right. Acting is safe. It would drive us nuts because they'd work a scene to death and work Jay Sandrich to death, trying to shape it up to their taste. And we'd be waiting in our dressing rooms, waiting to work, and, you know, bing, bing, bing when we worked the boys. Rhoda, Mary, Phyllis, was the trio, the 3 witches. So the only time I remember something being discussed, Ted had a turn by himself, and Gavin and I were sitting in the stands watching. Now, I want you to watch this. I'm going to try it this way this time. Tell me what you think. We would struggle and strive to get it right the first time. Here he flips this one over, and then he does it a second way, and he does that. And he comes back again. He says, now, this time I want to try it this way. Tell me what you think. He tried it a third way. And finally, when he did it, it was primarily the first method he used to present. Our time on stage was limited. Once Rhoda went off and did her own show, sought to be as supportive in every way to each other as they could be. Mary, this wonderful band of loonies around her, with her being the I thought we had something very good going. And working with Steven Weber was just enjoyed that a lot. Well, I guess he was Aaron's, who was busy pulling the strings and who was busy surviving and fighting the battle and winning them. We had been given chipped beef for our meal that day, which was I was hurt that she didn't greet me warmly when I came on to do her show. I start to eat the cherries, Jubilee, and I really have to get back, but it's been great seeing you. We did it twice. She loved doing it. She never knew I was getting my revenge. Bond, yeah, I could never say, no matter how nice he was. Although I must say, when I came to California, the best example is Lee Grant, who said I was married to needed him. Now that's a strain. How many times I needed him? Maybe once or twice. As president of the guild, he was sweet to me. He was open to me. Always took my calls, and I think he did great work. Made from that, and to pour it all directly to, just being around him. But Jack just kept getting better and better as an actor all his life. Unfortunately, when my scene with him where I pistol whip him, I used a rubber gun, and twice, without knowing it, I raked his face. That was so pilloried and editorialized against as that film. Before it opened, the arts pages were filled with op-ed pieces by some of the biggest writers in the country saying what a lie, what a scandal, what this, that. You know, I don't even know if they had seen the picture yet. It hadn't opened. But they were out. Loved the headstronginess. There was no tree he didn't want to climb. There was no. Then it would have become a Desi and Lucy show, I suppose.
The llama is actually called Dalai Lama, and it's actually owned by the director and the writer. I remember Johnny Depp having to talk about how he takes risks and chances in having to create a character. this might work or might not. You know, even when he played Jack Sparrow. When I did Napoleon Dynamite and I played Pedro Sanchez, I put Buster Keaton and my ex-girlfriend's dog together. And I thought, okay, maybe this might work. But when I met John Heder as Napoleon, the choices that I made, and with the help and the proper guidance of the director, sometimes in films you see a lot of the actors and they're always playing the same type of character. But that's who they really are, and that's great. You know, that's fun too, you know, but I read a lot. I'm at home watching Brando flick, you know, from Marlon Brando to Ricardo Montalban to Raul Julia. You know, even the actors of my generation, you watch Heath Ledger and you can watch his. And Pedro, he's such a character that's loved by so many fans, you know, because the film is such a wonderful story, you know, where families can sit together and enjoy from coast to coast. Or from all over the world, actually, and that's great. You know, I sent my friend sent me a picture from Israel that there was a sign saying "Vote for Pedro," and it was like somebody had spray painted on the wall my face, and I thought like, wow. So even now, after 7 years, when people approach me, people are nervous and scared, and they want to hug me. They're like, "Oh my God, you're Pedro." I'm like, "Oh my God, yeah, sure." I give them. I'm lucky to play a character that people love, as opposed to playing the villain, where I don't want to get, you know, you know. And you embrace it. You go, "Hi, how you doing?" They're like, "Okay, what's your real name?" And the animated series, you get to explore not only Napoleon and the world, but every single character, and that's great because every episode you get to see different skills. There's an episode where you see Pedro, and he sings and he plays guitar, you know. And I thought, well, all right. They go, "Can you do it?" Yeah. There's Ghost. People can blow up, you know, the world could go on fire. But because it's so packed and it's so flippin' hot, and I'm like, and it took one guy to say, "Pedro!" And I got bombarded and swarmed. It was cool, but it was just weird. And I got bombarded and swarmed. It was cool, but it was just weird. Okay, hey, get out of the way, punk. But the security had to show up, and they had to pull my best friend. I mean, still, all these years later. And I mean, they're fans, and it's Comic-Con, so you get bombarded no matter what.